She was 18, bruised, and praying for death behind the silk curtains of her mother's drawing room. He was the most feared duke in the north, a man whose wife and child had been murdered in a crime the law refused to solve. When he walked into that house and said, "I'm taking her," no one dared stop him. But what Lydia Hale didn't know was that she hadn't been rescued. She'd been dragged into a war. And before this story ends, the broken girl who couldn't speak above a whisper will bring an entire corrupt empire to its knees. Stay with me until the very end, because the final confrontation will stop your heart. If you love this kind of story, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale has traveled tonight. The bell had been ringing for 6 minutes before Lydia Hale finally moved. She counted each one. 6 chimes, each a little sharper than the last, the way her mother liked them. The servants were under strict orders to keep pulling the velvet cord until someone answered, and on the rare mornings when Lydia made them wait this long, she paid for it later. She knew that. She'd known it since she was 11, the first time Vivian Hale had made her kneel on a fistful of dried peas for forgetting to curtsy at breakfast. Knees remember things the mouth can't say out loud. But this morning, in the narrow attic bedroom at the top of Marwick House, Lydia was doing something dangerous. She was thinking. She sat on the edge of her bed, a hard, narrow thing with a horsehair mattress that pricked through the linen, and stared at her own hands. They were 18-year-old hands, but they didn't look it. The knuckles were thick. The right thumbnail was split down the middle, still black along the base, where a door had caught it 2 weeks ago. A door her mother had slammed while Lydia's hand was still in the frame. "Just wouldn't let go, would you?" Vivian had said afterward, in that sweet, pitying voice she used when other people might be listening. "Clumsy little thing?" The bell rang a 7th time. Lydia stood. She smoothed her dress, gray, plain, 3 seasons out of fashion, the hem frayed where she'd caught it on a nail, and walked to the small cracked mirror above the washstand. A girl looked back. Her hair was the color of wet straw. Her face was long and narrow, the cheekbones a little too sharp because she hadn't been allowed a full plate of anything since Christmas. There was a yellow bruise fading along her jaw. Her eyes were gray, and they were the only thing in her whole body she still recognized as her own. Downstairs, the bell stopped. That was worse than the ringing. "Miss Lydia." The voice came through the door, low, urgent. Hester, the housekeeper. 52 years old, 16 of them in Vivian's service, and the closest thing to a friend Lydia had in the world, though neither of them had ever used the word. "She wants you in the morning room," Hester said. "She wants you now." "Who's here?" Lydia asked. Her voice came out a rasp. She cleared her throat. "Hester, who's here?" A long silence on the other side of the door. "I don't know his name," Hester said at last. "But, miss, he came in a black carriage. 4 horses. 2 outriders. The crest on the door, I couldn't make it out proper, but it's northern work. And the man himself, he didn't hand his card to the footman. He handed it straight to Mr. Bramble, and Mr. Bramble went white as milk and ran. Ran, miss. I've never seen Mr. Bramble run in my life." Lydia's fingers went cold. "What does he look like?" "Tall," Hester said. "Dark. Older than you, maybe 30. A scar here." And Lydia could picture the housekeeper touching her own jaw through the door. "And eyes like he's already decided something, and nothing you say is going to change it. Miss, whatever it is, you need to come down, and you need to come down pleasant. Your mother, she's smiling. You know what that means." Lydia knew what that means. "I'll be there in 2 minutes," she said. "1," Hester whispered, and the floorboards creaked as she hurried off. Lydia stood in front of the mirror 1 moment longer. The girl in the glass looked back, and for a half breath, Lydia wondered what it would be like to just walk out the attic window instead. There was a slate roof below, a 3-story drop, quick, clean. Hers. She had wondered it a lot lately. Then she turned, and she went downstairs to meet the man who would, within the hour, change every single thing. Marwick House, seen from the outside, was the kind of place strangers slowed their carriages to admire. 4 stories of honey-colored stone on the edge of a Wiltshire village, with a sweep of gravel drive, a pair of stone griffins on the gateposts, and a long avenue of poplars that turned gold in October. There was an orangery. There was a pond with a carved stone bench beside it. There was a library, 2 drawing rooms, in a ballroom that hadn't been opened since 1837, when the last Mr. Hale was still alive and the whole county still came to dance. Seen from the inside, it was a coffin with wallpaper. Lydia moved through the corridors the way she always moved. Close to the walls, quick but quiet, eyes down, counting. She counted the steps from the attic to the second-floor landing, counted the paintings. 3 generations of Hale men in oil, all of them dead, all of them staring at the floor with that same bewildered look she secretly thought of as the family disease, counted the clocks. There were 9 clocks in Marwick House. Vivian liked them wound every morning. Every single one had to chime the hour together, and the servants spent an hour each Sunday adjusting them. If one chimed late, someone lost a week's wages. Lydia paused outside the morning room. She could hear her mother's voice, bright, warm, the voice she used for visitors, the one that could make a stranger write home about how charming Mrs. Hale of Marwick was, how unfairly the world had treated her, widowed so young with only that poor sickly daughter to manage. Lydia hated that voice more than she hated the other one. The other one was honest. She took a breath. She smoothed her collar over the bruise. She opened the door. 3 people stood in the morning room. Her mother, Vivian Hale, 41, black silk, a string of jet beads at her throat, her hair the same wet straw color as Lydia's, but piled high, and held with a tortoiseshell comb. Beautiful, in the way old knives are beautiful. Smiling. Mr. Bramble, the butler, pressed flat against the wall by the door, looking like he would very much like to be somewhere else. And by the window, with his back mostly to the room, a man. He was tall. That was the first thing. He filled the space near the window in a way no one in this house had ever filled a space. He wasn't looking at the garden. He was looking at the road beyond the garden, and he had the stillness of a person who'd been watching that road his entire life. His coat was plain black wool, beautifully cut, no decoration. His boots were muddy. He had not bothered to change them before coming in, and Vivian, who had thrown a teenage housemaid into the street last winter for tracking snow across the hall, had said nothing about it. He turned when the door opened. Lydia's first stupid thought was, he's not as old as Hester said. 32, maybe 33. Black hair, cut short the way a soldier wore it, and a face that had probably been handsome once before something unhappy had settled into it. The scar Hester had mentioned ran from just under his left ear to the corner of his jaw, a thin, clean line, the kind a blade made, not an accident. His eyes were very dark. They flicked over her once, top to bottom, the way a man looks at a horse at auction, and then came back to her face and stayed there. He didn't smile. Lydia had been smiled at by a lot of her mother's visitors. The smiles were usually worse than the staring. "Lydia, darling," Vivian said in that bright voice. Come in. Don't dawdle in the doorway. His Grace has been waiting." His Grace. Lydia took one step, and then another, and stopped with her hands folded in front of her, 2 paces inside the room. She had learned a long time ago that if she got too close to her mother with witnesses present, Vivian sometimes reached out and touched her, stroked her hair or her cheek, and the servants would see, and later everyone would agree what a devoted mother Mrs. Hale was. 2 paces was the safe distance. 2 paces let her see her mother's hand if it moved. "Your Grace," Vivian said smoothly. "My daughter. Lydia, this is His Grace the Duke of Ravensholt. He has come all the way from Northumberland to pay us a call. Isn't that an honor?" Ravensholt. Lydia almost flinched at the name. Almost. She had been trained out of flinching before she was 12. Every girl in England who read the gossip columns knew who the Duke of Ravensholt was. Not the man personally. No one seemed to know him personally. But the name. The stories. 3 years ago, his wife and their infant son had died in a carriage accident on the Great North Road. Except that half the country whispered it hadn't been an accident at all. The axle had been cut. The coachman had vanished the night before. No one had ever been arrested. No one had ever stood trial. The Duke had gone back to his estate, a black stone fortress in the moors called Blackthorn Hall, and had not been seen at court, at a ball, or at any public event since. He was said to be a monster. He was said to be mad. He was said to be the richest man north of York. He was said to have personally killed 3 men with his own hands in the year after his wife died and gotten away with it because the crown needed his money and his soldiers more than it needed justice. And he was standing in Vivian Hale's morning room. "Your Grace," Lydia said. Her voice came out low and steady. She was proud of that, in a distant way. She didn't curtsy. She had meant to. Her body simply didn't do it. She stood there with her hands folded, looking at him levelly, and she saw something move in his face. A flicker. Not a smile. Something closer to recognition. Vivian saw it too. "Lydia," her mother said very sweetly, "where are your manners?" "I apologize, Your Grace," Lydia said, still not looking at her mother. "I am unwell this morning. I did not expect company." "You are quite well enough," Vivian said. "She suffers headaches, Your Grace, a delicate constitution. It runs in the family, I'm afraid. My late husband, Mrs. Hale." The Duke's voice cut across the room. It was not loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the voice of a man who had never, in his life, needed to raise it. Vivian stopped mid-sentence. "I'd like to speak to your daughter," he said. "Alone." A beat. Vivian's smile did not slip. Lydia had to give her credit for that. The smile stayed perfectly in place while her mother's whole body rearranged itself around the insult. "Your Grace," Vivian said with a small, musical laugh, "I couldn't possibly. She is 18 years old and unmarried. It would be most improper—" "Mrs. Hale," he said again. Same voice, same flatness. "I am not asking." Mr. Bramble made a tiny sound against the wall, a kind of swallowed squeak. Lydia didn't look at him. Vivian's smile stayed. "Of course, Your Grace," she said. "Of course. I shall be just outside the door. Lydia, darling, do try to be charming." The word charming came out with a weight on it. A stone tied to the end of a rope. It meant, "I will hear every word through that door, and if I do not like what I hear, you will pay for it tonight." Lydia did not answer her mother. Vivian swept out. Mr. Bramble stumbled after her. The door clicked shut, and then Lydia Hale was alone in a room with the Duke of Ravensholt. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her. It should have been terrifying. It wasn't quite, which was its own kind of terrifying, because Lydia had spent 18 years learning to be terrified of the smallest things, the lift of a teacup, the tilt of a head. This man looked at her like she was a complicated problem, and he was not certain yet what the answer was, and Lydia found, to her surprise, that she could meet his eyes without flinching. "Miss Hale," he said finally. "Sit down." "I would rather stand." "Sit down," he repeated, "because you're going to need to. There isn't much time, and I'd rather you didn't faint." She sat. She chose the chair nearest the door, not the one by the fire. He noticed that. She saw him notice it. "My name," he said, "is Adrian Blackthorne. I came here today for one reason. I need you to listen very carefully." "I'm listening." 17 years ago," he said, "my father and your father were in business together. A shipping concern. When your father died, there was a settlement, a trust, that your mother was named to administer, on your behalf. You were supposed to come into it at 21. "I don't know anything about that," Lydia said. "No?" he said. "You wouldn't, because 3 years ago, your mother attempted to sell the whole of it, the ships, the warehouses, and a piece of land in Liverpool that alone is worth more than this house, to a man named Cresswell, who is a business partner of mine. She offered to forge your signature. Cresswell wrote to me instead because he and I have an understanding. I have known about it for 3 years. Lydia sat very still. "Why?" she said. Her voice had gone small. "Why didn't you—" "Because 3 years ago," he said, "I was in mourning, and I did not care about a girl I had never met whose mother was a thief. That is the honest answer, Miss Hale, and you'll get nothing but honest answers from me today, so you'd better get used to them." "All right." 2 weeks ago," he said, "Cresswell died. His papers came to me. Among them was a letter from your mother dated last month. She was trying to sell the same property again, to a different buyer, and in this letter she made reference to, and I am quoting, the inconvenience of a daughter who will not cooperate much longer." Lydia's hands were folded in her lap. She watched them. They had not moved. That was strange because somewhere inside her chest, a thing was breaking very quietly. "Miss Hale," he said, "do you understand what I am telling you?" "Yes." "Say it." "She's going to kill me," Lydia said in the small voice. "She's going to kill me before my birthday." "Yes." She can't. Lydia looked up. She can't. She'd never. People would ask. People would be told you were unwell. They would be told your constitution, like your father's, was delicate. There would be a small, quiet funeral. No one would ask. No one asks, Miss Hale. That is how these things are done. Lydia discovered that she could not feel her feet. Breathe, he said. I am. Breathe slower. Head down. Between your knees if you need to. I've seen men do it in battle. There's no shame in it. I don't. She put her head down. The room was tilting, just slightly. I'm not a man in a battle. Aren't you? He said. She looked up. He was still standing by the window. He hadn't moved any closer. He hadn't reached for her, hadn't tried to comfort her. It came to her slowly that this was perhaps the first man in her life who had told her something terrible and then simply let her have the feelings about it. Why? She said. Why are you here? Why do you care? You just said you didn't 3 years ago. I didn't, he said. I do now. That isn't an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. The answer is long, and most of it is mine, not yours. But I will give you a piece of it. 2 years ago, I had a wife and a son. They were murdered by men who believed the law wouldn't touch them because the law is what they are. I did not save them. I was hunting somewhere else. I came home, and they were in a ditch with the coach burned out over them, and I made a promise to a dead woman that I would not walk past it again. That's the answer, Miss Hale. You can dislike it if you want. It's still the answer. Bachim. The room was very quiet. I'm sorry, Lydia said, about your wife and your son. Don't be, he said. Be useful instead. What do you want me to do? Stand up. Come to this window. Look. She stood. Her legs were not entirely reliable, but she crossed the room. She stopped a careful distance from him. Old habit, and he noticed that too. He did not close the distance. He pointed out the window with 2 fingers. That carriage, he said, the black one, with the 4 horses. I see it. In 10 minutes, you and I are going to walk out of this house and get into that carriage. We are going to drive for 6 hours. At the end of 6 hours, we will stop at a magistrate's house in a town called Wenlock. I have already spoken with him. He has the papers. Your mother's administration of your trust is being set aside, effective this morning, on grounds of fraud, forgery, and attempted disposal of entailed property. As of noon, your trust is in the hands of a protector I have appointed. You will not be destitute. You will not be homeless. You will come to my estate, where my housekeeper, who has known me since I was 8 years old and who has never been afraid of me in her life, will look after you for a month while the legal matter settles. After the month, you will decide what you want next. Marriage, if you want it, to a man, not me. A house of your own, if you want it. A trip abroad. Anything. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Yes? Are you going to come? Lydia looked at the carriage. She looked at the black door. The crest was half turned away from the house. She could only see the edge of it, a silver bird with its wings out. Her whole life was behind her in this house. Her mother's voice in the corridor. Hester, who had brought her bread in her pocket when Lydia was 15 and locked in the linen room for 3 days. The cracked mirror in the attic, the cold slate roof, the stone bench by the pond where she'd sat as a child and talked to a reflection of herself in the water because she had no one else. Why are you giving me a month? She said. Why not just put me on a ship to France and be done with me? Because, he said, if you come with me today, people will say I abducted you. People already say worse about me. I don't care. But you will. And I will not have a girl under my roof who is there because she had no choice. The month is yours. At the end of it, if you want to leave, a carriage will take you wherever you wish. I will pay for it. You will never see me again. Is that sufficiently clear? Yes. Then decide. Lydia stood at the window, and for the first time in her life, a door was open. She thought, very clearly, very calmly, if I say no, I will be dead inside a year. And then she thought, with a small shock, if I say yes, I might not be. My things, she said. There's a box under my bed. Letters from my father before he died. A miniature of him. And a book, my grandmother's prayer book. They're the only things I have that are mine. Hester, he said. She blinked. You know Hester? I know her name, he said. I made inquiries. Send her up for the box. She'll bring it down. She's coming with us, by the way, if she wants. I told her so this morning through the kitchen door. She has a pension waiting if she prefers, but I thought you might like to have her. You... Lydia's throat closed for a second. You asked Hester. I asked a lot of people, Miss Hale, he said quietly. I have been asking for 3 weeks. I did not come to this house on a whim. I came when I was sure. She looked at him. His face had not changed. The scar, the dark eyes, the careful stillness, all the same. But she understood suddenly that she had misread him when she walked in. She had thought he was looking at her the way a man looks at a horse at auction. He wasn't. He had been looking at her the way a doctor looks at someone bleeding, trying to decide how much time was left. Your Grace, she said. Adrian, if you like. In private, Your Grace makes me feel like my father, and I did not like him. Adrian, she said, testing it. I'll come. Good. But I want to tell her myself. He went very still. Your mother? Yes? Miss Hale, that is a bad idea, I know. I know what she is. I have lived with her for 18 years, and you have known about her for 3. I am aware of what she is. I still want to tell her myself. He looked at her for a long moment. Why? He said. Because if I walk out of this house behind you, like a package, Lydia said, I will spend the rest of my life thinking I did. And I have spent 18 years walking behind her. I want the first step I take out this door to be my own. A muscle moved in his jaw. Not quite a smile. Something adjacent to one. All right, he said, but I will be in the room. No. Miss Hale, you said the month was mine. Start now. I will tell her. You will be in the hall. If she touches me, I will scream and you will come. If she does not touch me, you will stay in the hall until I walk out. Is that sufficiently clear? He was looking at her with something new in his face. Yes, he said. It is. Vivian Hale was in the hall. Of course she was. She had been standing on the other side of the morning room door the entire time, pretending to rearrange a vase of dried flowers on the console table. And the moment Lydia stepped out, she turned with her whole body, and the smile came on like a lamp. Darling, she said. Was His Grace? Mother, Lydia said, I need to speak with you. In the library. Now. The smile flickered. It was a very small flicker. A stranger wouldn't have seen it. But Lydia had been watching that smile her whole life, and she saw the small panic behind it, the quick recalculation, the scan of the hall for witnesses. Mr. Bramble near the stairs, the Duke's tall shape behind Lydia in the doorway, 2 footmen at the front door. Of course, dear, Vivian said. The library. How lovely. They walked down the corridor together. Lydia walked in front, which she had never done in her life. She heard her mother's silk dress whisper behind her. She heard the Duke's boots steady 3 paces back. The library door opened. Lydia went in first. She turned and faced her mother before Vivian was even fully inside. Close the door, Lydia said. Vivian closed it, slowly. The Duke did not come in. He stood in the hall, and Lydia caught, through the narrowing gap of the door, the dark, steady line of his shoulder against the wallpaper. Then the door shut, and it was the 2 of them. Lydia, Vivian said, very softly, what exactly have you done? I haven't done anything. What did you say to him? Nothing. Don't lie to me. I am not lying. Lydia's voice was level. It surprised her. It surprised her mother, too. Vivian's head came up slightly, the way a cat's does when another cat walks into its garden. He did the talking. I did the listening. I am leaving with him this morning. Excuse me? You heard me. Lydia Ann Hale, Vivian said, and took a step forward. You will sit down this instant, and you will tell me exactly. Mother, Lydia did not step back. It was not a decision. Her body simply forgot how. You sold the Liverpool land, she said, 3 years ago, to a man named Cresswell. You forged my signature. You tried again last month to someone else. Cresswell is dead. His letters went to the Duke. There is a magistrate in Wenlock with papers. You will lose the administration of my trust at noon. You will lose this house inside a year. These are facts, Mother. I know them. I am leaving now. Vivian's face did a remarkable thing. It didn't fall. It didn't crack. For one long second, it simply stopped. The whole performance, the charm, the beauty, the bright mother love, stopped like a clock with its mainspring cut. What was underneath was not pretty. It was older than she was. It was hungry. "You stupid girl," Vivian said. Her voice had changed. This was the other voice, the honest one. "You stupid, stupid girl," she said. "Do you think he wants you? Do you think a man like that crosses half of England for a plain little attic mouse in a second-hand dress? He wants the land. He wants Marwick. He wants your father's ships, and when he has them, he will put you in a room in the north and forget you exist. At least in this house, you are mine. You are known. You have a name. You go with him, and you will die there, and it will take years, and by the end of it, you will beg to come home, and there will be no home to come to because you will have destroyed it. You say..." "Goodbye, Mother." Vivian stopped. "What did you say to me?" "I said goodbye." Lydia's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back where her mother couldn't see. "I've said it every morning for 10 years under my breath, when you came in to check my hair. I've said it at dinner. I've said it when you locked the linen room. Today I'm saying it out loud." Vivian moved. It was fast. Faster than Lydia had expected. Fast in the way she got when there were no witnesses. The hand lifting, the body pivoting, the whole elegant machine of her lunging across the carpet toward her daughter. Lydia had flinched at that motion 1,000 times. 1,000. Her shoulders were supposed to come up. Her head was supposed to turn. Her eyes were supposed to close. They didn't. She stood. She watched her mother come, and Vivian stopped 3 feet short because something in Lydia's face had stopped her. They stood like that for maybe 4 seconds. Then Lydia turned, and she walked to the library door, and she opened it, and she walked out. The Duke was in the hall, exactly where she had left him. He looked at her face. He looked past her, at Vivian in the doorway, who was white to the lips. He looked back at Lydia. "Miss Hale," he said, "Your Grace. Are you ready?" "Yes." "Hester is in the carriage already. Your box is with her. Bramble is being difficult in the kitchen. It is being dealt with. We leave now." "Yes." She started to walk. Behind her, her mother's voice, one last time, low and shaking and ugly. "You will regret this, Lydia. You have no idea what you've done." Lydia did not turn. She walked the length of the hall, past the 9 clocks, all of them ticking in perfect agreement, past the portraits of the 3 dead Hale men staring at the floor, past Mr. Bramble, who had appeared in a side doorway and was watching her go with an expression she could not read, past the footman at the door, one of whom, young, maybe 16, met her eyes for a flash and gave her, astonishingly, the smallest nod. The front door was open. The gravel was bright in the sun. The black carriage waited on the drive, the 4 horses stamping and blowing. The silver bird on the door was fully visible now. A raven, wings spread, something in its beak. A key, Lydia saw. The raven had a key in its beak. Hester's face was in the carriage window. "Oh, miss," Hester whispered as the Duke handed Lydia up the step. "Oh, miss." "I'm all right, Hester. Your hands are cold as stones. I know." The Duke climbed in after her. He did not sit beside her. He sat across from her, his back to the horses, his long legs folded to one side to give her room. He closed the door himself. He knocked on the roof. The carriage lurched once and began to move. Lydia looked out the window. Marwick House slid past. The orangery. The pond. The stone bench where a child had once talked to her own reflection because she had no one else. The long avenue of poplars. Her mother standing on the top step in black silk, not moving, not calling out, just standing, the way a statue stands. Lydia watched her mother until the carriage took the bend in the drive and the trees hid the house. And then she put her hands in her lap, and she discovered that they were shaking so hard she could not hold them still. Across from her, the Duke of Ravensholt took off his gloves, folded them, and laid them on the seat beside him. He did not look at her shaking hands. He did not offer a handkerchief. He did not say any of the things men said to women in moments like these, the theirs and the you poor dears, and Lydia thought, distantly, that this was another kindness, maybe the real one, that he had the decency not to pretend this was small. "Miss Hale," he said, after perhaps a mile. Yes. You did well in there. I didn't do anything. You walked out on your own feet. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, most of it. Lydia looked at him. The scar, the dark eyes, the careful stillness of a man who had lost everything once and had since become very precise about how he arranged what was left. Your Grace, Adrian. Adrian, may I ask you one question? Yes. Is any of it true? What she said about why you came? He looked at her for a long time. Some of it, he said, not the way she meant it. I will tell you the rest when we stop tonight. It is a long ride, Miss Hale, and you have had a very bad morning, and you need to sleep. Hester will wake you when we change horses. There is bread in the basket and water. Don't try to be brave about eating. Eat. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Lydia ate a piece of bread. She ate it because he told her to, which was the first time in her life she had done something because a man told her to and not been afraid of what came next. She ate it slowly, and she looked out the window at the fields of Wiltshire sliding past, and after a while Hester reached across and squeezed her hand, hard, once, and did not let go. Miss, Hester whispered, Miss, your whole life is on the other side of this road. I know. Are you all right? Lydia looked at the old woman. She looked at the Duke, who had turned his face to his own window now, giving them the small privacy of his inattention. I don't know what I am yet, Hester, Lydia said. And outside, the bells of Marwick village began to ring the noon. 9 o'clock in her mother's house. 3 hours since the bell in her attic room. 3 hours ago, she had been a girl counting chimes and thinking about a slate roof. Now she was in a black carriage with a raven on the door, riding north through the bright English sun, and whatever she was about to become, it was not that girl anymore. That girl was dead in the drawing room at Marwick House. Lydia Hale was just beginning to figure out what had been born in her place. The road north was worse than Lydia had imagined. Not the road itself. That was good English gravel, wide and well kept, the kind of road that mail coaches ran on twice a day. No, the road was fine. It was the enormity of leaving that sat in her chest like a stone she'd swallowed whole. She watched the fields turn from the soft green of Wiltshire to the harder gray green of something bleaker, and every mile felt like a thread pulled tighter around her ribs. They stopped twice in the first 5 hours. Once to change horses at a posting inn where the Duke got out, spoke to the ostler in a low voice, and came back with a covered basket that turned out to have cold chicken and apples, and a jar of something Hester said was honey. Lydia ate because Hester put the food in her hands and would not take it back. The second time they stopped because the left rear wheel had picked up a stone, and while the coachman dealt with it, the Duke walked Lydia and Hester around the yard of a blacksmith shop where no one was working, and Lydia realized slowly that he was letting her stretch her legs without making it seem like he was watching her do it. You can say it, she said, halfway around the second lap. He looked at her. They were walking side by side now, Hester a few paces behind, inspecting a rain barrel with great focus. Say what, Miss Hale? That I look like I'm going to my own hanging. You don't, he said. I feel like it. That, he said, I believe. They walked a few more steps. It gets easier, he said. Does it? No, but you get harder. It evens out. She almost laughed. Came out as a sound somewhere between a cough and a breath. And he glanced at her, and something in his face shifted. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of wherever smiles used to live before they moved out. That's a terrible thing to tell someone, Lydia said. I told you this morning, honest answers only. I'm not going to lie to you to make you comfortable, Miss Hale. Comfortable people don't survive what comes next. And what comes next? Blackthorn Hall, he said. My housekeeper, a hot bath, a bed with a lock on the inside of the door. And after that, we'll see. The carriage wheel was fixed. They got back in. The sun was lower now, slanting gold through the windows, and Hester fell asleep with her head against the wall, snoring softly. Lydia did not sleep. She sat with her hands in her lap and watched the Duke, who had taken a small leather notebook from his coat and was writing in it with a pencil, his handwriting cramped and exact. What are you writing? She asked. A list. Of what? People I need to write to when we arrive. The magistrate in Wenlock, my solicitor in London, a banker in York. Your mother's solicitor to inform him that any further correspondence regarding your trust should come to me. He looked up. And a man named Garrett who works for me and who will be making inquiries. Inquiries into what? Your mother, he said. Her finances. Her associates. The men she attempted to sell your property to. If she has done this to you, Miss Hale, she has done it to someone else. People like that don't begin with their daughters. They begin smaller and work their way up. Lydia looked at him. You sound like you've met people like that before. I have. Did you? She stopped, started again. Did you stop them? Some of them, he said. Not all. The ones I didn't stop, I remember. The ones I did, I also remember. Neither list is very pleasant reading. He closed the notebook, slid it back inside his coat. Miss Hale, may I ask you a question? Yes. This morning, in the library, when your mother moved toward you, why didn't you call for me? Lydia had been expecting the question since the moment she walked out of the library. She still didn't have a good answer. I don't know, she said. Try. Because, she said slowly, if I had screamed and you had come in, she would have been the one who looked hurt. She would have put her hand to her chest and said I was hysterical. And everyone, Mr. Bramble, the footman, everyone, would have believed her. Because that is what she does. She makes you the one who looks mad, and she is always, always the reasonable one. And I have spent my entire life being the mad one, the difficult one, the sickly girl who imagines things. I didn't want... Her throat closed. She made herself finish. I didn't want you to see me like that. Not on the first day. He was quiet for a long moment. Miss Hale, he said. Yes, I have seen battlefields. I have seen men with their legs blown off trying to stand up and walk because they cannot quite believe it has happened yet. I have seen a woman pull her dead child out of a ditch and try to wake him. I have seen what people look like when the worst thing happens, and they are still alive afterward. You could scream in my face for an hour, and I would not think you mad. I would think you had cause. Do you understand what I am telling you? I think so. Then understand this too. You are 18 years old. You have lived in a house with a woman who wanted you erased. You are not difficult. You are not sickly. You are not mad. You are what happens when someone survives something they should not have been able to survive. I do not find that pitiable, Miss Hale. I find it remarkable, and I am not easily impressed. Lydia could not speak. She turned her face to the window and watched the fields blur past, and discovered that her eyes were wet, and that she did not particularly care if he saw, because he had just said the thing she had needed someone to say for 10 years, and had not known she needed until he said it. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. Hester snored. The carriage jolted over a rut. Somewhere ahead, the sun was setting over a place Lydia had never been, and behind them, in a house she would never see again, her mother was standing in a library and realizing, perhaps for the first time, that the game was over. Lydia closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to be remarkable instead of mad. It felt dangerous. It felt like standing at the top of a very high cliff and leaning forward just to see. They reached Blackthorn Hall after midnight. Lydia had dozed off somewhere near the border. Hester had draped a carriage blanket over her knees and told her to stop fighting it, and the next thing she knew, Hester was shaking her shoulder and saying, Miss, we're here. She sat up. The carriage had stopped. Outside the window, it was full dark. No moon, no stars, just the yellow spill of lantern light from somewhere ahead, and beyond that, a shape so large and black it looked like the hill had grown teeth. That's the house? Lydia said. That's the house, the Duke said. He had been awake the whole time. She could tell from the way he moved. No stiffness, no sleep in his eyes. He opened the carriage door himself and stepped down, held out a hand. Lydia took it. The gravel under her feet was different from the gravel at Marwick House. Sharper, louder. She looked up at the building in front of her and understood, with a small shock, that calling it a house was like calling the ocean a pond. Blackthorn Hall was a fortress. 3 stories of black stone, narrow windows, a central keep that looked like it had been built to withstand a siege, because it probably had. There were crenellations along the roofline. There was a gatehouse, though the gate itself was long gone. There were 2 lanterns burning on either side of a massive oak door, and standing in the pool of light between them was a woman in a gray dress and a white cap. her arms folded, her face the kind of face that did not smile often, but when it did, meant it. "Mrs. Calloway," the Duke said, "Your Grace." The woman came down the steps. She was perhaps 55, built like a door, with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Lydia the way a ship's captain looks at a new sailor, assessing, brisk, not unkind. "Miss Hale, welcome to Blackthorn. You'll be tired. I've had a room made up. There's a fire, clean linens, and a supper tray if you want it, though I'll not force you to eat if you'd rather sleep." "Thank you," Lydia said. Her voice came out hoarse. She cleared her throat. "Mrs. Calloway, is it?" "It is. And this must be Mrs. Drummond," the housekeeper said, turning to Hester, who had climbed down from the carriage and was standing very close to Lydia's elbow. "You'll have the room next to Miss Hale's. I've been told you've been looking after her a long while. You'll want to keep doing it, I expect." His Grace said as much. "Come on then, both of you, before the wind knocks you over." And it was windy. Lydia hadn't noticed it in the shelter of the carriage, but the moment she turned toward the door, the wind hit her like a hand, cold and huge and smelling of wet earth and something wilder. Heather, maybe. Peat. She didn't know the North. She'd never been farther than Salisbury in her life. Inside, the hall was enormous. Stone floors. A staircase wide enough to drive a cart up. Tapestries on the walls, old ones, the kind with knights and stags and ladies in pointed hats. A fireplace you could stand in. The ceiling was vaulted, disappearing into shadow, and there were swords mounted on the walls. Real ones, not decorative, the kind with nicks in the blades. "Miss Hale," the Duke said. He had come in behind her. "Mrs. Calloway will show you to your room. I will see you at breakfast. 9 o'clock. If you sleep past it, no one will wake you, and there will be something in the kitchen when you come down. If you need anything in the night, pull the bell cord by the bed. Someone will come." "All right." He looked at her for a moment, and she had the strangest sense that he was trying to decide whether to say something else. Then he nodded, once, and walked off down a corridor, his boots echoing on the stone. Mrs. Calloway watched him go. "He's not good at this part," she said. "What part?" Lydia asked. "The part where someone else is in the house," Mrs. Calloway said. "He's been alone here since it happened. 3 years, that is, with no one but the staff and the occasional solicitor. You'll have to forgive him if he's a bit stiff about it. He means well. He's just forgotten how to show it." "He's been kind," Lydia said. "Has he?" Mrs. Calloway looked pleased. "Good. That's good. Come along then. Up we go." The staircase was even wider than it had looked from below. Lydia climbed it with Hester at her side, Mrs. Calloway leading the way with a candle in a brass holder. And at the top they turned down a corridor lined with more portraits. Men in armor, women in ruffs, all of them staring at nothing with the same grim look people got when they sat for paintings and were told not to move for 3 hours. "This is you," Mrs. Calloway said, stopping in front of a door. She pushed it open. The room was not large, but it was clean. A 4-poster bed with dark green curtains, a wardrobe, a washstand with a porcelain jug and basin, a fire burning in the grate, and next to the fire, a small table with a tray. Bread, cheese, cold meat, a pot of tea under a cozy. And on the inside of the door, a bolt. Lydia stared at it. "His Grace said you'd want that," Mrs. Calloway said quietly. "Said it was important. So I had Thomas fit it this afternoon. It's solid. No one's coming through that door unless you let them." Lydia's eyes were stinging again. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. Thank him. He's the one who thought of it." Mrs. Calloway set the candle down on the table. "Mrs. Drummond, you're just here, next door. I'll show you. Miss Hale, you settle in. If the fire goes low, there's more wood in the box. If you need anything, the bell cord's by the bed. Like His Grace said, I sleep light. I'll hear it." She went out. Hester gave Lydia's hand one last squeeze and followed her. The door closed. Lydia stood in the center of the room and listened to the silence. It was a different silence from Marwick House. There, the silence had been the held breath kind, the kind where you waited for the footsteps in the corridor, the creak of the floorboard outside your door, the voice calling your name in that sweet, terrible way. Here, the silence was just silence, the wind outside, the crackle of the fire, the faint settling of old beams. She crossed to the door. She slid the bolt home. It made a solid, final sound. And for the first time in 18 years, Lydia Hale was in a room where no one could reach her unless she opened the door herself. She sat down on the bed. She put her face in her hands, and she cried. Not the silent kind, the kind she'd learned to do without making noise, but the loud, ugly kind, the kind that left her gasping and shaking and wrung out like an old cloth. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she ate half the bread, drank all the tea, and fell asleep in her clothes on top of the covers with the fire still burning and the bolt still drawn. Morning came in the form of birds. Lydia woke to the sound of them. Dozens, maybe hundreds, making a noise she didn't have a name for. Not singing, shrieking. She sat up, disoriented, her dress twisted around her legs, and for one terrible second she thought she was back in the attic at Marwick, and then she saw the green bed curtains and the bolt on the door and remembered. North. Blackthorn Hall. The Duke. She stood. Her whole body ached from sleeping in her corset. She went to the window and looked out. The view knocked the breath out of her. Miles of nothing. That was the only way to describe it. Miles and miles of gray-green moor rolling away under a sky so big it looked like it might fall. No trees, no houses, just the moor, and in the distance a line of black crags that might have been mountains or might have been the edge of the world. The birds were ravens, Thad. She could see them now, a whole flock of them wheeling over the hall, their voices harsh and strange. A knock at the door. "Miss?" Hester's voice. "You decent?" Lydia unbolted the door. Hester came in with a bundle of clothes over one arm and a worried look on her face. "You slept in your dress." "I know." "Your hair's a fright." "I know that too." "Well, come on then. Mrs. Calloway sent these up. Said they belonged to the last Duchess. Said you're near enough the same size, and His Grace gave permission. There's a gray wool, a blue cotton, and a brown walking dress. All of them plain. She said she thought you'd prefer plain." Lydia looked at the dresses. They were plain. They were also beautiful, well-made, good fabric, the kind of thing Vivian would have spent a month's household budget on and then complained was too simple. "Help me out of this," Lydia said, turning her back. Hester unlaced the dress. Lydia stepped out of it and stood in her shift, and Hester made a small, pained noise. "Miss, you're back." Lydia had forgotten about her back. There were bruises, old ones, fading yellow-green, from where Vivian had shoved her into the edge of a table 3 weeks ago. Newer ones, purple, from the door frame. A long scrape across her shoulder blade from something Lydia couldn't even remember anymore. "It's fine," Lydia said. "It's not fine." "Hester," Lydia turned. "It's fine. It's over. She's 200 miles away, and I'm here, and I'm fine. Help me into the gray." Hester helped her into the gray. It fit. It fit almost perfectly, which was strange and sad and a little eerie, because it meant the last woman who had worn it had been Lydia's height and build, and that woman was dead in a ditch 3 years ago, and Lydia was standing in her bedroom wearing her clothes. "You look lovely," Hester said, but her voice was shaking. "I look like a ghost," Lydia said. "You look alive. That's more than I thought we'd manage yesterday morning." Lydia almost smiled. "Come on," she said. "Let's find breakfast before I lose my nerve." The dining room was on the ground floor, down a corridor and through a set of double doors that opened onto a long room with windows facing east. The table could have seated 20. There was one place set at the far end with a single chair. The Duke was not there. Lydia stood in the doorway, uncertain, and then a young man in livery appeared from a side door and bowed. "Miss Hale, His Grace sends his apologies. He was called to the estate office an hour ago. A matter with the tenants. He will join you when he is able. In the meantime, I'm to see you fed. What would you like?" Lydia blinked. "What do you have?" "Eggs, bacon, sausage, kippers, toast, porridge, ham, kidney, mushrooms, tomatoes, and Mrs. Calloway made scones this morning, though His Grace hasn't tried them yet, so I can't vouch for them." It was more food than Lydia had seen on a table in 6 months. "Toast," she said, "and tea, that's all." The footman looked at her like she'd said something in a foreign language. Mrs. Calloway will have my head if that's all you eat." "Then bring the scones too," Lydia said, And jam, if there is any. There was jam. There were 3 kinds. Lydia sat at the enormous table in the dead Duchess's dress and ate 2 scones with strawberry jam and drank a pot of tea. And halfway through the second scone, the double doors opened and the Duke walked in. He looked tired. That was the first thing she noticed. The second thing was that he had mud on his boots again, and the third thing was that he saw her see it and did not apologize. "Miss Hale," he said, "Your Grace, you slept." "I did." "Good." He sat down, 2 chairs away from her, which she thought was deliberate, close enough to talk, far enough not to crowd. The footman brought him a plate without being asked. Eggs, bacon, toast. He ate the way men eat when they've been up since dawn and haven't thought about food until someone puts it in front of them. "There's a problem," he said, after 3 bites. Lydia set down her tea. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where your mother is not taking this quietly." He pulled a folded letter from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. "That arrived by express rider an hour ago, from my solicitor in London. Your mother's solicitor has filed an objection to the magistrate's order. They're claiming I coerced you, that you were taken against your will, that you are being held here under duress." Lydia's hands went cold. "That's not true. I know it's not true. You know it's not true. But the law does not know you, Miss Hale, and the law does know your mother because she has spent 18 years making herself look like a saint. So now we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where, in 3 weeks, an investigator is going to arrive at this house to interview you, to determine whether you are here of your own free will. And if he decides you are not—" The Duke stopped. Started again. "If he decides you are not, he has the authority to remove you, to return you to your mother's custody until the matter is resolved in court, which could take months. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Lydia understood. She understood that her mother had just made the first move in a game Lydia had thought was over, and that the game was not over and would not be over until one of them stopped breathing. "Who is the investigator?" she said. "A man named Whitmore. Crown investigator. He has a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" The Duke looked at her for a long moment. "The kind," he said quietly, "where he does not investigate. He decides what the outcome will be before he arrives, and then he finds the evidence to support it. And your mother, Miss Hale, is a very charming woman to men who have never lived with her." Lydia set down her cup. Her hand was steady. She was proud of that. "So he's going to decide I was coerced," she said. "Yes, and he's going to take me back. He's going to try. And if he succeeds, you will be dead inside a year," the Duke said. He did not soften it. He did not look away. "I told you yesterday, honest answers, that is the honest answer." Lydia sat very still. The room was quiet except for the fire and the distant sound of the ravens outside. She looked at the table, at the plate in front of her, at the strawberry jam smeared across the edge of the scone she had not finished. "Your Grace," she said. "Adrian. Adrian. What do we do?" He leaned back in his chair. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "I don't know," he said. "If this were a matter of law, I could fight it. I have solicitors, I have money, I have influence. But Whitmore does not care about law. He cares about power and about who pays him, and your mother has something I do not." "What?" "Sympathy," he said. "She is a widow, a mother. A woman of modest means whose only daughter was taken by a man with a title and a fortune and a very ugly history. I am the villain in this story, Miss Hale. I have been the villain since my wife died. And villains do not win in court. They win other ways." "What other ways?" He looked at her. "I could kill him," he said. Lydia blinked. "Excuse me?" "I could kill him," the Duke repeated in the same flat voice he had used to order breakfast. "I have done it before. 3 men. In the 2 years after my wife's death. Men who were involved. Men who thought they were safe. They were not. I found them. I dealt with them. And I got away with it because I am very good at making things look like accidents, and because the men I killed were not important enough for anyone to care. Whitmore is not important either. If he dies on the road to Blackthorn, in a fall from his horse, or a badly cooked meal at an inn, no one will ask many questions. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Lydia stared at him. "You're telling me," she said slowly, that you would commit murder to keep me from going back to my mother. Yes. Why? Because, he said, I told you yesterday. I made a promise to a dead woman, and I do not break promises. The room was very quiet. Lydia looked at the man across from her, the scar, the dark eyes, the stillness of someone who had looked at the worst thing in the world and decided he would rather become a monster than let it happen again. No, she said. He frowned. No? No, Lydia said. You're not going to kill him. Miss Hale, I said no. Her voice was louder than she meant it to be. She took a breath, tried again. You're not going to kill him because if you kill him, my mother wins. She gets to say you're a monster. She gets to say I was right to be afraid. She gets to be the victim. And I have spent 18 years being the thing she used to make herself look good. And I will not let her use me that way again. Do you understand what I am telling you? The Duke was very still. Then what do you propose? He said. Lydia had no idea. She had spent her whole life being told what to do, where to stand, when to speak. And now a man was asking her what she wanted, and she had no practice at wanting things. But somewhere under the fear, under the cold weight of knowing Whitmore was coming, an idea was forming. A bad idea. A dangerous idea. The kind of idea her mother would never expect. He's coming to determine if I'm here of my own free will, Lydia said. Yes. Then we show him that I am. How? Lydia looked at him. We get married, she said. The Duke's face did not change. For a long, terrible moment, he just stared at her, and Lydia thought wildly that she had miscalculated, that she had said the worst possible thing, that he was going to stand up and walk out and leave her here to wait for Whitmore alone. Then he said very quietly, Explain. If I'm your wife, Lydia said, I'm not my mother's daughter anymore, not legally. I'm yours. Whitmore can't remove me. He can't take me back. He can ask all the questions he wants, and the answer will be the same. I'm the Duchess of Ravensholt, and I'm exactly where I want to be. You don't want to marry me, Miss Hale. I don't want to die. Marriage is not— I know what marriage is, Lydia said. I know what it means. I know it's permanent. I know it's not some temporary arrangement we undo when the danger passes. I know that, but I also know that if I go back to that house, I will not live to see my 19th birthday, and I would rather be your wife than my mother's corpse. The Duke stared at her. You don't know me, he said. I know enough. You know nothing. You know I pulled you out of a bad house. You do not know what kind of house you are in now. You do not know what I am. Then tell me. He stood, turned away from her, walked to the window and stood there with his back to the room, his hands clasped behind him. I told you I killed 3 men, he said. Yes. I did not tell you how. Lydia waited. The first one, he said, I drowned in a horse trough. It took 4 minutes. I timed it. The second one, I pushed off a scaffolding. He broke his neck. It was quick. The third one, I poisoned. Arsenic in his whiskey. It was not quick. I sat in the room and watched him die, and I felt nothing. Do you understand, Miss Hale? I felt nothing. And when it was over, I went home, and I slept like a child, and I have not regretted it once. That is what you would be marrying, a man who has killed, and who will kill again if he has to, and who does not lose sleep over it. Lydia stood. She crossed the room. She stopped 3 feet from him, the same distance she had kept in the library at Marwick when her mother had come at her. Your Grace, she said. He did not turn. Adrian, she said. He turned. I do not care, Lydia said, who you killed. I care that you are standing here telling me the truth when every other man in my life has lied to me and called it kindness. I care that you came to Marwick when you did not have to. I care that you put a bolt on my door. I care that you are afraid I will say yes to this for the wrong reasons, when most men would take the yes and not ask why. I do not need you to be good, Adrian. I need you to be honest. And you are the only person in my life who has been. He looked at her for a very long time. If we do this, he said, it is real. Not a performance. Not a trick for Whitmore. Real. Do you understand? Yes? You will be my wife. In law. In name. In every way that matters. I understand. And when Whitmore is gone, he said, when your mother is no longer a threat, you will still be my wife. There is no undoing it. There is no going back. Are you prepared for that? Lydia thought of the attic room, the bells, the bruises, the pond where a child had talked to her reflection because she had no one else. Yes, she said. The Duke looked at her, the scar, the dark eyes, the careful stillness. All right, he said. All right? We'll do it, he said, but not here and not quietly. If we're going to do this, Miss Hale, we're going to do it in a way your mother cannot contest. We're going to do it in front of witnesses, in a church, with a license and a vicar and half the county watching. Because when Whitmore comes, I want him to walk into a house where the entire village can tell him the Duke of Ravensholt married a girl in broad daylight, and she said yes in a voice everyone heard. Do you understand? Yes. Then we leave in 2 days. There's a church in the village. I'll speak to the vicar this afternoon. Mrs. Calloway she'll help you. With the dress, the arrangements, all of it. He stopped. Miss Hale, Lydia, are you certain? I'm certain. Then we're agreed. He held out his hand. Lydia took it. His hand was warm, calloused. He shook her hand once, firmly, the way men shake hands when they've agreed to something larger than both of them, and then he let go. 2 days, he said. 2 days, Lydia agreed. And somewhere, 200 miles south, Vivian Hale was sitting in the library at Marwick House, waiting for the investigator to arrive, certain her daughter would be returned to her broken and obedient. She had no idea her daughter was about to become untouchable. The wedding dress arrived on the morning of the second day, and it was not what Lydia had expected. She had been bracing herself for something grand, lace and pearls and the kind of gown that took 3 women to lace you into. What Mrs. Calloway carried through the door was cream-colored silk, simple in cut, with long sleeves and a high neck and no decoration at all, except a line of tiny buttons down the back that looked like they'd been carved from bone. It was hers, Mrs. Calloway said, setting it on the bed. The last Duchess. She wore it when she married His Grace. He said you could wear something else if you preferred, but I thought, I thought you might like something that meant something, instead of something new. Lydia touched the fabric. It was cool under her fingers, soft, real. She was my size, Lydia said. Near enough. We'll take it in at the waist. You're thinner than she was. Mrs. Calloway's voice was brisk, but her hands were gentle as she lifted the dress and held it up to Lydia's shoulders. There. Yes. It'll do. It'll more than do. You'll look lovely, Miss Hale. I'll look like a girl in a dead woman's dress. Mrs. Calloway set the dress down. You'll look, she said firmly, like a woman who is about to make a choice that will save her life. And if that choice means wearing a dress that belonged to someone else, well, the Duchess would have understood that. She was practical, that one. She'd have wanted it used. Lydia looked at the housekeeper. Did you like her? The Duchess? I loved her, Mrs. Calloway said. No hesitation. She was good to the staff, good to His Grace, good to that baby in the short time she had him. When she died, something in this house died with her. We've been waiting 3 years for it to wake up again. Maybe it's waking now. Maybe that's you. I'm not her. No one's asking you to be. Mrs. Calloway picked up the dress again, draped it over her arm. Come on, let's fit this proper. The vicar's expecting you at 2 o'clock, and His Grace has gone to speak with half the village to make sure there's witnesses. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. The church was small and stone and older than anyone could remember. It sat at the edge of the village, a cluster of maybe 40 cottages and one inn, all of them huddled together against the moor like they were afraid the wind would blow them away. The vicar was a thin, nervous man named Penworth, who kept looking at the Duke like he expected to be struck by lightning. And when Adrian told him what was needed, Penworth had gone pale and stammered something about bans and licenses and the proper way to do things. I have a special license, Adrian said, and produced a folded document from his coat, signed by the bishop. It's legal. It's binding. All you need to do is read the words and witness the signatures. Your Grace, This is highly irregular. Irregular, Adrian said, is a girl being stolen from her family by a mother who forged her name on legal documents. Irregular is an investigator being sent to determine whether I've coerced a woman who came to me of her own free will. This, Vicar Penworth, is the correction. Now, will you perform the ceremony, or do I need to ride to the next parish and find someone who will? Penworth performed the ceremony. He agreed to do it at 2 o'clock the following afternoon, and he agreed to send word to the village that the Duke of Ravensholt was to be married, and that anyone who wished to attend was welcome. By the time Adrian left the vicarage, there were already 3 women standing in the churchyard, whispering to each other and staring. Adrian did not acknowledge them. He rode back to Blackthorn, and when he arrived, he found Lydia in the library with Hester, sitting by the fire with a book open in her lap that she was not reading. "It's done," he said from the doorway. Lydia looked up. The vicar agreed? The vicar had no choice. And the village? We'll be there, half out of curiosity, half because they haven't had anything interesting to gossip about since the blacksmith's daughter ran off with a tinker 2 years ago. Either way, there will be witnesses. He paused. "Miss Hale, Lydia, are you still certain?" She closed the book, set it aside, stood. "I'm certain," she said. "You don't look certain." "I look terrified," Lydia said. "That's different." He almost smiled. "Almost. Tomorrow," he said. 2 o'clock. "Mrs. Calloway will bring you to the church. I'll be there." What do I say? When the vicar asks if I consent, what do I say? "You say yes," Adrian said, loudly, so that every person in that church hears you. And then you say it again when Whitmore arrives and asks you the same question. And after that, Adrian said, "You're my wife, and Whitmore can go to hell." He left. Lydia sat back down. Her hands were shaking again. Hester reached over and took them, squeezed hard. "Miss," Hester whispered, "are you doing the right thing?" "I don't know," Lydia said, "but I'm doing the only thing." The wedding took 11 minutes. Lydia had counted funerals that lasted longer, dinner parties, sermons. But this thing that was supposed to change her entire life, was over before she had time to feel anything except the hammering of her own heart and the weight of the ring Adrian slid onto her finger. It was gold, plain, a little too large. It spun when she moved her hand. The church was full, not packed, but full enough that when Lydia walked down the aisle on Mrs. Calloway's arm, there was no one else to give her away, and Lydia had refused to walk alone. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, women in their Sunday best, men in clean shirts, children fidgeting in the pews, and at the front, standing beside Vicar Penworth, Adrian Blackthorn in a black coat and a white shirt and an expression that gave away nothing at all. He looked at her as she approached, and for one terrible second, Lydia thought she saw something like regret cross his face. Then it was gone, and he was holding out his hand, and she was taking it, and Penworth was opening his prayer book with hands that shook slightly. "Dearly beloved," Penworth began, and his voice cracked on the first word. The ceremony was a blur. Lydia heard pieces of it, the part about forsaking all others, the part about sickness and health, the part where Penworth asked if anyone present knew of any lawful impediment. No one spoke. The church was silent except for the shuffle of feet and the cough of an old man in the back pew. Then Penworth turned to Adrian. "Do you, Adrian Edward Blackthorn, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Adrian said. His voice was steady, flat, the voice of a man signing a contract. Penworth turned to Lydia. "Do you, Lydia Ann Hale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Lydia opened her mouth. The words stuck. She could feel the whole room waiting, could feel Adrian's hand still holding hers, warm and solid, could feel Hester somewhere behind her, probably crying, could feel the weight of the dress, the dead Duchess's dress, pulling at her shoulders. She thought wildly, I could say no. I could turn around and walk out. I could run. But she had been running her whole life, and where had it gotten her? "I do," Lydia said. It came out louder than she meant it to, clear, certain. A murmur went through the church, not disapproval, just surprise. A girl saying yes like she meant it was apparently novel enough to warrant comment. Penworth looked relieved. "Then by the power vested in me," he said quickly, "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride, your grace." Adrian looked at Lydia. She looked back. Neither of them moved. The church waited. "We'll skip that part," Adrian said. Penworth blinked. "Your Grace, we'll skip it," Adrian repeated. He turned to the congregation. "Thank you all for coming. There will be ale at the inn tonight on my account. Drink to our health." A ragged cheer went up. Someone in the back started clapping. Adrian took Lydia's arm gently, carefully, like she was made of glass, and led her down the aisle and out into the cold, bright afternoon. The moment they were outside, he let go. "That's done," he said. "Yes. You're the Duchess of Ravensholt now." "I know. Whitmore arrives in 2 weeks. When he does, you tell him exactly what you told that church, that you married me of your own free will, that no one forced you, that you are precisely where you want to be. Can you do that?" "Yes." He looked at her, really looked, for the first time since the ceremony started. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lydia laughed. It came out sharp and bitter and nothing like the sound she'd meant to make. "No," she said. "I'm married to a man I met 3 days ago because my mother is trying to kill me, and an investigator is coming to drag me back to her if I can't prove I left willingly. I'm wearing a dead woman's dress and a ring that doesn't fit, and standing in a churchyard where half the village just watched me sign my life away. No, Your Grace, I am not all right." He was quiet for a moment. "Adrian?" he said. "What?" "You're my wife now. You call me Adrian." "Fine. Adrian, I'm not all right." "No," he agreed. "You're not, but you're alive, and you're standing, and that's more than you had 3 days ago." Lydia looked at him. The scar, the dark eyes, the man who had just married her without touching her, without smiling, without even pretending this was anything other than what it was. "Why didn't you kiss me?" she asked. He looked away. "Because," he said, "I gave you a month to decide if you wanted to stay. We're 4 days in. The kiss can wait until you've decided. I already decided. I married you." "You married me to survive," Adrian said. "That's not the same as wanting me, and I will not take something from you just because the law says I can." Lydia stared at him. She had spent 18 years with a woman who took everything, her voice, her body, her future, and called it love. And here was a man who had just been given the legal right to all of it, and he was stepping back. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded once. "The carriage is waiting. We'll go back to Blackthorn. You'll rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for Whitmore." "How do we prepare for a man like that?" "We don't," Adrian said. "We prepare you. Because when he walks into that house, you're going to be the one he interrogates. Not me. You. And you're going to need to be ready." Whitmore arrived 13 days later, not 14. He came in a black carriage with a crown seal on the door and 2 armed outriders, and he did not send word ahead. The first anyone at Blackthorn knew of his arrival was the sound of hooves on the gravel drive, and Mrs. Calloway running into the library where Lydia and Adrian were sitting over breakfast. "Your Grace," Mrs. Calloway said, breathless. "He's here." Adrian set down his coffee. "Now?" "Now, this minute, at the front door." Lydia's stomach dropped. "I thought we had another day," she said. "So did I." Adrian stood. "Mrs. Calloway, show him to the drawing room. Offer him tea. I'll be there in 5 minutes." "And and her Grace?" "Her Grace," Adrian said, looking at Lydia, "will join me in 10. Lydia, listen to me. Do not rush down there. Do not look flustered. Take 10 minutes. Fix your hair. Put on the blue dress, the one with the high collar. Walk down those stairs like you own this house. Because you do. You're the Duchess. He's a civil servant. You outrank him. Do you understand?" Lydia nodded. "Say it." "I outrank him." "Good. 10 minutes." He left. Lydia sat very still for a moment, and then she stood and went upstairs with Hester, and she let Hester lace her into the blue dress and pin up her hair and tell her over and over that she could do this, that she was strong, that she was not the girl in the attic anymore. 10 minutes later, Lydia walked down the stairs. The drawing room door was open. She could hear voices inside, Adrian's, low and controlled, and another voice, smoother, a man's voice that sounded like honey poured over a knife. She stepped into the doorway. The man who turned to look at her was not what she had expected. Whitmore was perhaps 45, with graying hair and a pleasant, forgettable face. He was dressed well, but not ostentatiously. A gray coat, a dark waistcoat, the clothes of a man who wanted to blend in. He smiled when he saw her. "Your Grace," he said, and the smile reached his eyes, which made it worse somehow. "How lovely to meet you. I am Inspector Whitmore. I apologize for arriving unannounced. The roads were better than anticipated." "Inspector," Lydia said. She did not curtsy. Duchesses did not curtsy to inspectors. "Welcome to Blackthorn." "Thank you." He gestured to the chair across from him. "May I have a moment of your time? I have some questions. Routine, I assure you. A formality." "Of course." Lydia sat. Adrian stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, watching. Whitmore settled back in his chair and pulled a small leather notebook from his coat pocket. He opened it, glanced at a page, then looked up at Lydia with that same pleasant smile. "Your Grace," he said, "when did you first meet the Duke of Ravensholt?" 17 days ago." "And where did this meeting take place?" "At my mother's house, Marwick House, in Wiltshire." "I see. And what was the nature of this meeting?" "He came to inform me that my mother had been attempting to defraud my inheritance. He offered me sanctuary while the legal matter was resolved." "Sanctuary," Whitmore repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's an interesting choice of phrase. Did you feel you needed sanctuary, Your Grace?" "Yes." "From your mother?" "Yes." Whitmore made a note. "And so you left with the Duke, that very day, I understand." "That's correct. Without taking time to consider, without seeking independent counsel, without informing anyone of your intentions." "I informed my mother." "Ah, yes." Whitmore flipped a page. "According to Mrs. Hale, you informed her that you were leaving, but you did not explain why, nor did you give her an opportunity to respond to the Duke's accusations. Is that accurate?" Lydia's hands were cold. "I told her I was leaving," she said. "She knew why." "Did she?" "Because Mrs. Hale tells a rather different story. She says you seemed confused, frightened, that the Duke was standing in the hall, preventing her from speaking to you privately, that when she tried to object, he threatened her." "That's not true." "Which part?" "Any of it." Lydia's voice was rising. She made herself bring it down. "I was not confused. I was not frightened of him. My mother is lying." "Your Grace," Whitmore said gently, "I understand this is difficult, but you must understand my position. I have a mother who claims her daughter was taken against her will by a man with, forgive me, Your Grace, a rather troubling history. A man whose own wife died under circumstances that were never fully explained. A man who has, by his own admission, not appeared in society for 3 years. And now, less than 3 weeks after meeting you, he has married you. You can see how this might raise questions." "I can see how my mother might use those questions to manipulate you," Lydia said. Whitmore smiled. It did not reach his eyes this time. "Your Grace," he said, "are you here of your own free will?" "Yes." "Did the Duke coerce you in any way?" "No." "Threaten you?" "No." "Offer you money or property in exchange for your cooperation?" "He offered me safety," Lydia said. "That's all." "And in exchange for this safety, you married him?" "Yes." "Less than 2 weeks after arriving at this house?" "Yes." "Your Grace, forgive me, but that is not the behavior of a woman making a free choice. That is the behavior of a woman who is trapped and sees only one way out." Lydia stood. She had not meant to. Her body simply did it, pulling her to her feet before her mind caught up. "Inspector Whitmore," she said, and her voice was shaking, but it was loud, and that was what mattered. "I'm going to tell you something, and I am going to tell you once, and you are going to write it down in that little book and take it back to London and tell my mother that it did not work." Whitmore raised an eyebrow. "Your Grace, I am 18 years old. I have spent my entire life in a house where my mother controlled every breath I took, where she decided when I ate, when I slept, when I spoke, when I was seen. where she hit me when no one was looking and called me sickly when they were, where she forged my name on documents and sold my inheritance and made plans to have me dead before I could inherit what was left. I know what a trap looks like, Inspector. I lived in one for 18 years. And this, she gestured at the room, at Adrian, at Blackthorn. This is not a trap. This is the first place in my life where I have had a locked door, where I have had enough to eat, where a man has told me the truth and then let me make my own choice. So when you ask me if I am here of my own free will, the answer is yes. When you ask me if I was coerced, the answer is no. And when you go back to my mother and tell her that I am the Duchess of Ravensholt and she will never touch me again, I want you to tell her something else. What's that, Your Grace? Tell her I'm not afraid of her anymore. The room was silent. Whitmore looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Adrian, who had not moved from his place by the fireplace, and then he looked back at Lydia. Your Grace, he said quietly, those are serious accusations. They're not accusations, Lydia said. They're facts. And if you want proof, I can show you the bruises. Some of them are still visible. Would you like to see? She reached for the collar of her dress. That won't be necessary, Whitmore said quickly. He closed his notebook, stood. Your Grace, thank you for your time. I believe I have everything I need. So you'll be leaving? Adrian asked. He had not moved. His voice was flat. I will be filing my report, Whitmore said. The Crown will make a determination based on my findings. And what will those findings say? Whitmore looked at Lydia, at Adrian, back at Lydia. I will be recommending, he said slowly, that the matter be reviewed further by individuals more qualified than myself to determine the Duchess's state of mind. Lydia's stomach turned to ice. What does that mean? She asked. It means, Whitmore said with that same pleasant smile, that this is not over, Your Grace, not by a long measure. Good day. He walked out. The moment the door closed, Lydia sat down hard. He's going to take me back, she said. No, Adrian said. He said it's not over. He said he's recommending further review. That means he didn't find what he came to find. That means we won. That's not what it sounded like. Adrian crossed the room, knelt in front of her chair so they were eye level. Lydia, he said, listen to me. Whitmore came here expecting to find a frightened girl who would break the moment he pushed. He did not find that. He found a duchess who looked him in the eye and called her mother a liar. That is not the report he wanted to write. So now he's going back to London, and he's going to tell whoever sent him that the situation is more complicated than they thought. And that buys us time. Time for what? Time for me to do what I should have done the moment I got that first letter from your mother. Which is? Adrian stood. I'm going to London. I'm going to find out who paid Whitmore to come here, and then I'm going to make sure they never send anyone else. How? He looked at her. You don't want to know how, he said. Lydia stood. Yes, I do. Lydia, you keep saying you're going to be honest with me, she said. So be honest. What are you going to do? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Your mother has allies, he said. Men with money, men with power, men who have something to gain from seeing you return to her custody, because if you're dead, your inheritance goes to her, and if it goes to her, she can sell it and they can buy it. I'm going to find those men. I'm going to find out what they want, and then I am going to take it away from them so completely that they will consider it a mercy to leave you alone. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving you, Adrian said, because the details are not something a duchess needs to know. You said it yourself, Lydia. You're not afraid of your mother anymore. Don't start being afraid of me. I'm not. Then trust me, he said. I leave tomorrow. I'll be gone a week. Maybe less. While I'm gone, you stay here. You do not leave Blackthorn. You do not speak to anyone who comes to the door unless Mrs. Calloway approves them first. You do not write to your mother. You do not write to anyone. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I understand. He nodded, stepped back. Good, he said. I'll send word when I have news. He left the room. Lydia stood alone in the drawing room and looked at the chair where Whitmore had been sitting, the pleasant, forgettable man with the honey voice and the knife smile, and she understood with a cold, clear certainty that this was not over. Whitmore had not come to investigate. He had come to decide. And he had decided that Lydia Hale, Lydia Blackthorn, was lying. Adrian left before dawn the next morning. Lydia heard the carriage on the gravel and went to the window in time to see him climb in, his coat black against the gray pre-dawn light. He did not look up at the house. The carriage pulled away, and he was gone. The house felt different without him, larger, quieter. Lydia spent the morning in the library, trying to read, trying not to think about what Adrian was doing in London, trying not to imagine Whitmore sitting in some government office writing a report that would end with Lydia being dragged back to Wiltshire in chains. She gave up on reading around noon and went to find Mrs. Calloway. The housekeeper was in the kitchen, supervising the preparation of something that smelled like mutton and rosemary. She looked up when Lydia came in, and her face did the thing it always did when she was trying not to look worried. "Your Grace," she said, "you shouldn't be down here. If you need something, ring for—" "I don't need anything," Lydia said. I can't sit upstairs anymore. I'm going to go mad." Mrs. Calloway wiped her hands on her apron. "His Grace said you were to stay inside." "I know what he said. I'm not going far. Just a walk around the grounds. I won't leave the estate." "Your Grace, please," Lydia said. "I need to move. I need to breathe. I've been in this house for 2 weeks and I can feel the walls pressing in. Just half an hour. That's all." Mrs. Calloway looked at her for a long moment. "Take Hester," she said finally. "And Thomas, the footman. He's a big lad, good with his fists if it comes to it. And you stay where we can see you from the house. Agreed?" "Agreed." Lydia found Hester and Thomas and walked out into the cold afternoon. The moor was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, all gray stone and wind-bent grass and the distant sound of ravens calling to each other across the sky. Lydia walked along a path that led away from the house toward a stand of stunted trees, Hester beside her, Thomas a few paces behind. "Miss," Hester said quietly. "Her Grace, I mean. Are you all right?" "I don't know," Lydia said. "Ask me again in a week." They walked in silence for a few minutes. The trees were closer now, gnarled, dark things that looked like they'd been growing there since the beginning of the world. "Hester," Lydia said, "do you think I did the right thing, marrying him? Do you?" "I don't know. I think I did the only thing, but that's not the same." "No?" "No," Hester agreed. "It's not. But sometimes the only thing is also the right thing. You're alive, aren't you? You're standing here on a moor in the north and your mother is 200 miles away and she can't touch you. That's more than we had 2 weeks ago. What if Whitmore— Whitmore, Hester said firmly, is a man who gets paid to make problems for people. His Grace will deal with him. You don't need to carry that weight. His Grace is in London doing something he won't tell me about. Because, Hester said, he's trying to protect you. Men do that. Even the good ones. Especially the good ones." Lydia was about to answer when Thomas made a sound behind them, a short, sharp intake of breath. She turned. Thomas was staring at something past the trees. "What is it?" Lydia asked. "Rider," Thomas said. "Coming fast." Lydia looked. He was right. There was a rider, a single man on a black horse, coming across the moor at a gallop. He was maybe half a mile out, but closing fast, and there was something about the way he rode, low in the saddle, pushing the horse hard, that made Lydia's chest tighten. "Inside," Thomas said. "Now. Your Grace, we need to go inside." "Who is it?" "I don't know and I don't care. Inside, now." They ran. Lydia had not run in years. Her mother had always said running was unladylike. But she ran now, her skirts hiked up in both hands, Hester panting beside her, Thomas ahead of them shouting for the house. The front door opened and Mrs. Calloway was there, her face white. "Get inside," Mrs. Calloway said. "All of you. Bar the door." They got inside. Thomas slammed the door and threw the bolt. Lydia ran to the window. The rider had reached the drive. He pulled the horse up in a spray of gravel and swung down, and Lydia's heart stopped. It was not Whitmore. It was a man she had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with a hard, flat face and eyes like stones. He strode toward the door and pounded on it with one fist, hard enough to make the wood rattle. "Open up," he shouted. "I'm here for the girl." Mrs. Calloway appeared beside Lydia. Her face was gray. "That's Cade," she whispered. He used to work for the men who killed the Duchess." Lydia felt the room tilt. "What does he want?" "You," Mrs. Calloway said, and outside the man named Cade pounded on the door again and shouted, I know she's in there. Send her out, or I'm coming in. The pounding came again, harder this time, and Lydia heard wood crack. He's going to break it down, Hester whispered. Mrs. Calloway turned to Thomas. The back door. Is it barred? I'll check. No time, Mrs. Calloway said. Get the women upstairs, the Duchess's room. Lock the door. I'll deal with this. You can't, Lydia started. I can, and I will. Go, now. But Lydia didn't move. She was staring at the front door, at the way the wood shuddered with each blow, and something in her chest was shifting. Not fear. She'd expected fear. This was something colder, something harder. She had spent 18 years hiding in rooms while other people decided her fate. She was done hiding. No, Lydia said. Mrs. Calloway turned. Your Grace? No, Lydia repeated. She crossed to the door and stood in front of it, her hands at her sides. Thomas, when I tell you, open the door. Miss, Your Grace, you can't be serious. I'm the Duchess of Ravensholt, Lydia said, and her voice came out steady, certain, nothing like the girl who'd stood in her mother's drawing room 2 weeks ago. This is my house, and I'm not going to let some hired thug pound on my door like I'm a criminal. Open it. Your Grace, if he gets his hands on you, then you'll stop him, Lydia said. You said you were good with your fists. Prove it. Open the door. Thomas looked at Mrs. Calloway. The housekeeper's face was white, but she nodded once. Thomas unbolted the door and pulled it open. Cade was mid-swing when the door opened. He stumbled forward, caught himself, and then straightened to his full height. He was bigger up close, not tall so much as wide, built like a man who'd spent his life moving heavy things and breaking things that didn't want to be broken. His coat was mud-spattered. His face was unshaven. His eyes were the color of dirty ice. He looked at Lydia and smiled. There she is, he said. Lydia did not step back. Who are you? She asked. Name's Cade. I work for some people who have an interest in you, Your Grace. He said the title like it was a joke. They sent me to collect you. Make this easy on yourself and come quiet. Collect me for whom? Your mother mostly, and the gentlemen who've been financing her little schemes. They're not pleased you ran off. Bad for business, them losing track of valuable property. I'm not property. Of course you are, Cade said. You're worth, what, 50,000 pounds? More? That's the Liverpool land alone, not counting the ships and the warehouses. And your mother's promised all of it to some very patient men, soon as you're back where you belong and she can get your signature on the right papers, or your death certificate. Either works. Lydia's stomach turned to stone. My mother hired you. Hired's a strong word. Let's say we have an arrangement. She gets you back, I get paid. Simple. And if I refuse to go? Cade's smile widened. Then I stop being polite about it. He took a step forward. Thomas moved to block him. Cade hit Thomas once, a short, brutal jab to the stomach that doubled the footman over and sent him to his knees, gasping. Mrs. Calloway screamed. Hester grabbed Lydia's arm and tried to pull her back, but Lydia yanked free and stepped forward, putting herself between Cade and the others. Don't touch them, she said. Cade laughed. You giving me orders now, girl? I'm giving you a choice, Lydia said. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her voice was steady. You can leave now, on your own feet, and tell my mother you couldn't find me. Or you can stay, and when my husband returns, he will kill you. He's done it before. 3 men in 2 years. He told me about it. He told me how long it took. He told me he felt nothing. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Cade stopped smiling. Your husband, he said slowly, is in London. I watched him leave this morning. That's why I'm here. So you can drop the act, Your Grace. There's no one coming to save you. I don't need saving, Lydia said. I need you to leave. Not without you. He moved. Lydia had seen men move like that before. Her mother's visitors, the ones who came late at night and left before dawn. The ones who looked at Lydia like she was something to be used and discarded. She knew the look. She knew the reach. But this time she didn't freeze. This time she moved too. She grabbed the fireplace poker from the stand beside her, heavy iron, 3 feet long, with a pointed end, and swung it at Cade's head with everything she had. He was fast. He got his arm up in time to block it, and the poker cracked against his forearm with a sound like wood splitting. He roared and stumbled back, and Lydia swung again, this time low, aiming for his knee. She missed. The poker hit his shin instead, and he went down on one knee with a curse. "You little—" Lydia raised the poker again. "Get out of my house," she said. Cade looked up at her. Blood was dripping from where the poker had split the skin on his forearm. His face was twisted with rage. And something else. Surprise, maybe. He hadn't expected her to fight. Neither had she. "This isn't over," Cade said. "Yes, it is. Get out." He got to his feet, slowly, favoring his left leg. He looked past Lydia at Thomas, who was on his feet now, wheezing but upright. At Mrs. Calloway, who had produced a kitchen knife from somewhere and was holding it like she knew how to use it. At Hester, who had armed herself with a brass candlestick. "You're making a mistake," Cade said. "I've made worse," Lydia said. "Leave. Now. Before I change my mind and let them finish what I started." Cade spat on the floor. Then he turned and walked out, limping slightly, blood dripping from his arm onto the gravel. He climbed onto his horse, awkwardly, favoring his injured leg, and rode off without looking back. The moment he was out of sight, Lydia's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor, the poker clattering from her hands, and discovered that she was shaking so badly her teeth were chattering. "Miss," Hester said, dropping down beside her. "Miss, you're all right. You did it. You did it." "I hit him," Lydia said. Her voice sounded far away. "I hit a man with a fireplace poker." "You did more than hit him," Thomas said, from where he was still bent over near the door. "You broke his arm, Your Grace. I heard it crack." "I didn't mean to—" "Yes, you did," Mrs. Calloway said. She was standing over Lydia now, the knife still in her hand. "And well done, too. But, Your Grace, we have a problem." "What problem?" "He's going to come back," Mrs. Calloway said. "And next time, he won't come alone." Mrs. Calloway was right. They spent the next hour barring every door and window on the ground floor, while Thomas rode to the village to fetch the constable and anyone else willing to come. Lydia sat in the library with Hester and tried not to think about the sound the poker had made when it hit Cade's arm, or the look on his face when he'd realized she wasn't going to come quietly. She had never hit another person in her life. Her mother had hit her more times than she could count, but Lydia had never raised a hand to anyone. She'd been taught that ladies didn't fight, that violence was beneath them, that there were better ways to solve problems. Her mother had lied about that too. The constable arrived an hour later with 3 men from the village, a blacksmith, a farmer, and the innkeeper's son, all of them carrying whatever weapons they'd been able to grab on short notice. The constable was a thin, nervous man named Porter, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. "Your Grace," Porter said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Thomas says a man tried to force his way in, that he threatened you." "He did more than threaten," Lydia said. "He said he was here to take me back to my mother, by force, if necessary." "And you—" "Thomas says you struck him with a poker." "I did." Porter blinked. "Your Grace, I'm not sure that was—" "He was in my house," Lydia said, "uninvited. He assaulted my footman. He told me he intended to abduct me." "What exactly should I have done, Constable? Asked him politely to leave?" Porter swallowed. "No, Your Grace, of course not. It's just, well, if he files a complaint—" "Against a duchess," Mrs. Calloway said from where she was standing by the window, "for defending herself in her own home? I'd like to see him try." "Still," Porter said, "Your Grace, if this man is as dangerous as you say, you shouldn't be here alone. Not with his Grace away. I can leave 2 men here tonight, to keep watch. But after that his Grace will be back," Lydia said, with more confidence than she felt. "And he will deal with this." Porter nodded. He posted the blacksmith and the innkeeper's son at the front and back doors, respectively, and then he left with the farmer, promising to return in the morning. The house settled into an uneasy quiet. Lydia tried to sleep that night, but every sound, the wind, the creak of the floorboards, the call of a night bird outside, made her bolt upright, her heart racing. She got out of bed around midnight and went to the window and looked out at the moor, dark and vast under a sliver of moon. Somewhere out there, Cade was planning his next move. And somewhere in London, Adrian was doing the same. And Lydia was here, in the middle, with a fireplace poker and a handful of villagers, and the growing, terrifying realization that she had just declared war on people who had far more experience with violence than she did. She went back to bed, She did not sleep. Adrian returned 2 days later, just after dawn. Lydia was in the library when she heard the carriage. She ran to the window and saw him climbing out, his face drawn, his coat filthy. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. She met him at the door. "What happened?" he asked the moment he saw her face. "A man came 2 days ago. He said his name was Cade. He said my mother sent him to take me back." Adrian went very still. "Did he touch you?" "No, I hit him with a poker. And he left. But Mrs. Calloway says he'll come back." "Cade," Adrian said quietly. "I know him. He's one of the men who killed my wife." The room tilted. "What?" "He worked for them. The men who cut the axle on her carriage. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. I've been hunting him for 3 years, and now he's here." "Adrian, where is he now?" "I don't know. He rode off. The constable came, but—" Adrian didn't wait for her to finish. He turned and shouted for Thomas. The footman appeared, still limping slightly from where Cade had hit him. "How many men can we gather?" Adrian asked. "From the village? Maybe a dozen. More if we send word to the neighboring estates." "Send word. I want 20 men here by noon, armed, and I want every road out of this valley watched. Cade doesn't leave here alive." "Your Grace—" "Do it," Adrian said. He turned back to Lydia. "Upstairs. Now. You're not leaving your room until this is over." "No." He stared at her. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Lydia's voice was shaking, but she held his gaze. "I'm not hiding upstairs while you go after the man who killed your wife. I'm the reason he's here. I'm the reason this is happening. I'm not going to sit in a locked room and wait for you to come back and tell me it's over." "Lydia, you said I was remarkable," Lydia said. "You said I survived something I shouldn't have been able to survive. You said you were impressed. So stop trying to protect me like I'm made of glass and let me help." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "How?" he said finally. "I don't know yet," Lydia said, "but I'll think of something." Thought. The something came to her 3 hours later while she was pacing the library and Adrian was in the stable yard organizing the men Thomas had gathered. She had been thinking about Whitmore, about the way he'd smiled when he said the matter would be reviewed further, about the way he'd looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, not a person to be believed. Whitmore hadn't come to investigate. He'd come to build a case, and if Cade had come here on her mother's orders, then Whitmore and her mother were working together. They had to be. The timing was too perfect. Whitmore leaves, Cade arrives. Whitmore files his report. Cade grabs Lydia before anyone in London can question her version of events. But what if Lydia could prove it? What if she could prove that her mother and Whitmore and Cade were all working together to abduct her and steal her inheritance? What if she could make it public? She went to find Adrian. He was in the yard talking to a group of men holding rifles and farm implements. He looked up when she approached. "I need to go to London," Lydia said. The men stopped talking. Adrian stared at her. "Absolutely not. Listen to me. Whitmore is working with my mother. He has to be. The timing proves it. He comes here, decides I'm lying, leaves, and 2 days later Cade shows up to drag me back? That's not coincidence. That's coordination. And if we can prove it, Lydia, we don't have time. If we can prove it," Lydia continued, "then we can go to the authorities. The real authorities. Not Whitmore, someone above him. And we can show them that my mother isn't some grieving widow whose daughter was stolen. She's a criminal who's been trying to murder me for my inheritance, and she's been paying Crown investigators to help her do it." Adrian was quiet, and one of the men, the blacksmith, cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but the Duchess has a point. If Whitmore's bent, and you can prove it, that changes everything." "It's too dangerous," Adrian said. "Cade is still out there." "So we bring Cade with us," Lydia said. "We find him, we capture him, and we bring him to London in chains and make him testify." "He'll never testify." "He will if he thinks it's his only way out of a noose," Lydia said. "You said he was one of the men who killed your wife. You have evidence, don't you? Or at least enough to make a case. So we offer him a deal, testify against my mother and Whitmore, and he lives. Refuse, and he hangs for murder." Adrian looked at her like he'd never seen her before. "Where did you learn to think like this?" he asked. "I had a good teacher," Lydia said. She taught me how to manipulate people, how to find their weaknesses, how to make them do what you want while making them think it was their idea. I just never used it before because I was always the one being manipulated. But I'm not anymore. I'm the Duchess of Ravensholt, and I'm done being a victim." The yard was silent. Then the blacksmith started to laugh, a low, rough sound that spread to the other men until half of them were grinning. "I like her," the blacksmith said to Adrian. "She's got steel in her." Adrian didn't smile, but something in his face shifted. The same thing Lydia had seen the day she walked out of her mother's house. Recognition. "All right," he said. "We'll do it your way. But first, we find Cade." They found him that night, holed up in an abandoned shepherd's cottage 5 miles from Blackthorn. Adrian had sent men out in pairs to search every building within a day's ride, and it was the farmer's son who spotted smoke from the cottage chimney and rode back to report. By the time Adrian and Lydia and a dozen armed men arrived, it was full dark. Adrian made Lydia stay behind the line with Thomas and 2 others, while he and the blacksmith and 4 more men surrounded the cottage. Lydia watched from behind a stone wall as Adrian kicked in the door and dragged Cade out by his collar. Cade fought. He landed one solid punch on the blacksmith's jaw before 3 men wrestled him to the ground and tied his hands behind his back. He was cursing the entire time, a stream of filth that made even the farmer's son look uncomfortable. Adrian hauled him upright and shoved him toward the wall where Lydia was standing. "Your Grace," Adrian said, "I believe you've met." Cade spat at her feet. Lydia didn't flinch. "Mr. Cade," she said, "I have a proposition for you." "Go to hell." "You can do that," Lydia said, "or you can listen, because right now you're looking at a noose. My husband has evidence linking you to the murder of his wife and child, enough to see you hanged. But if you testify against the people who hired you, against my mother and Whitmore and whoever else is paying you, I'll see that you're transported instead. Australia. You'll live. You'll never come back to England, but you'll live. That's the deal." Cade laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You think I'm going to rat on your mother? You have no idea what she's capable of." "I lived with her for 18 years, Lydia said. "I know exactly what she's capable of, and I know she'll throw you to the wolves the moment it's convenient. So you can take your chances with her, or you can take my deal. Choose." Cade looked at her, at Adrian, at the men surrounding him. "If I testify," he said slowly, "and they come after me." "They won't," Adrian said, "because by the time you testify, they'll be in custody themselves. You have my word." "The word of a duke," Cade said. "Forgive me if I'm not impressed." "Then take the word of a man who's killed 3 people to protect what's his," Adrian said, "and who's about to kill a 4th if you don't start talking." Cade was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "All right, I'll talk. But I want it in writing, the deal. I want a pardon signed by someone who matters." "You'll get it," Lydia said. "Now, tell us everything." Cade talked for 2 hours. He told them about Vivian Hale's arrangement with a consortium of investors who'd been waiting for Lydia to turn 21 so they could buy her inheritance at a fraction of its value. He told them about Whitmore, who'd been on Vivian's payroll for 6 months, paid to make sure any investigation into Lydia's disappearance concluded that she'd been abducted. He told them about the plan to have Lydia declared mentally unfit and returned to her mother's custody, where she would die, quietly, respectably, of some unnamed illness, within the year. And he told them about the men who'd killed Adrian's wife. Not just their names, but where they were, what they'd been paid, and who had ordered the murder in the first place. A shipping magnate named Cresswell, who'd wanted Adrian's business connections and had decided the fastest way to get them was to make Adrian vulnerable. Cresswell. The same man Vivian had tried to sell Lydia's property to 3 years ago. "They're all connected," Lydia said when Cade finally stopped talking. "My mother, Whitmore, Cresswell, all of them. It's the same network." "And now we're going to take it apart," Adrian said. They left for London the next morning. Adrian, Lydia, Cade in chains, and 6 men from the village as escort. The ride took 4 days. They stopped only to change horses and sleep in shifts, never staying in one place more than a few hours. Lydia had never been to London. She had imagined it would be grand, all marble and spires and ladies in silk. What she found instead was noise and smoke and narrow streets packed with people who stared at the Duchess in the traveling coach like she was some kind of exotic animal. Adrian took them directly to the offices of the Lord Chancellor, the man who oversaw the Crown's legal apparatus and who had the authority to investigate sitting investigators. The meeting took 6 hours. Lydia sat in a wood-paneled room and told her story to a man in a white wig who listened with the expression of someone who'd heard 1,000 terrible things and had stopped being surprised by any of them. Adrian presented the evidence. Cade testified, his voice flat and mechanical, as if he were reading from a script. When it was over, the Lord Chancellor leaned back in his chair and looked at Lydia. "Your Grace," he said, "do you understand what you're asking me to do? I'm asking you to arrest my mother," Lydia said, "and Whitmore, and anyone else involved in this conspiracy. You're asking me to arrest a widow of good standing and a Crown investigator on the word of a confessed murderer and a girl who married a duke 2 weeks after meeting him." "I'm asking you to do your job," Lydia said, "or I'm going to walk out of this office and tell every newspaper in London that the Crown protects criminals who prey on young women for profit." The Lord Chancellor's eyebrows rose. "Your Grace, I have names," Lydia said. "Dates, transactions, letters. I have a man willing to testify in open court, and I have a story that will sell a lot of papers, so you can investigate. Or you can explain to Parliament why you chose not to. Your choice." The room was silent. Then the Lord Chancellor smiled. It was a thin, sharp smile, the kind a cat gives a mouse. "I see why you married her," he said to Adrian. "So do I," Adrian said. The Lord Chancellor stood. "Very well, Your Grace. You'll have your investigation. And if what you've told me is true, you'll have your arrests." Whitmore was arrested 3 days later at his home in Mayfair. Vivian Hale was arrested the same day at Marwick House, while she was sitting in the drawing room with her solicitor discussing how best to contest the magistrate's ruling. The consortium of investors scattered the moment they heard. 2 fled to France. 1 killed himself. The rest hired lawyers and began cooperating in exchange for leniency. Cresswell was already dead. He'd died 2 years earlier, which meant someone else had taken over his network. The investigation would take months to untangle. But it had started. And it had started because a girl who'd spent 18 years silent had finally learned to use her voice. Lydia stood in the window of Adrian's London house, a narrow, elegant building near Grosvenor Square, and watched the street below. Carriages, vendors, people going about their lives with no idea that 200 miles north, a woman in an attic room had once counted bells and thought about dying. "Lydia." She turned. Adrian was in the doorway, holding a newspaper. "It's in the Times," he said. "What does it say?" "That the Crown has opened an investigation into fraud and conspiracy involving multiple parties, including a sitting investigator. That arrests have been made. That the Duchess of Ravensholt provided key testimony." He paused. "They're calling you brave." "I'm not brave," Lydia said. "I'm angry." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." She took the paper from him, read the article. Her name was there, in print, for the first time in her life, not followed by the words sickly or delicate or poor dear. Just, "The Duchess of Ravensholt, who exposed the conspiracy." "They're going to come after us," Lydia said. "The investors, the ones who got away. They're going to try to discredit me, say I'm lying, say you forced me to testify." "Let them try," Adrian said. "You've already won, Lydia. They just don't know it yet." "How can you be sure?" "Because you're standing in a window in London reading about yourself in the newspaper, and your mother is sitting in a cell waiting for trial. That's how." Lydia looked at him. The scar, the dark eyes, the man who'd pulled her out of a nightmare and handed her the tools to dismantle it. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For believing me, when no one else did. For coming to Marwick. For putting a bolt on the door. For letting me choose." "Lydia, I'm not done," she said. "Thank you for not kissing me at the wedding, for giving me time to decide, for being honest even when the truth was ugly. Thank you for showing me what it looks like when someone keeps their promises." Adrian was very quiet. Then he said, "The month isn't up yet. You still have 2 weeks. If you want to leave—" "I don't," Lydia said. "You should be sure." "I am sure," Lydia said. "I was sure the day I married you. I just didn't know how to say it yet. But I'm saying it now. I want to stay, not because I'm afraid, not because I need rescuing, but because I choose to. Is that clear enough?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, and for the first time since the day they met, he touched her. Just his hand on her cheek, careful, like he still wasn't sure he had permission. "That's clear enough," he said. And Lydia has sus. Lydia, who had spent 18 years flinching from hands that touched her, leaned into this one. Outside, London carried on. The newspapers printed their stories, the investigation ground forward. And somewhere in a cell in Wiltshire, Vivian Hale realized that the daughter she'd tried to erase had just erased her instead. The trial began 3 weeks later, on a gray morning in October when the rain came down in sheets and turned the London streets to rivers of mud. Lydia stood at the window of Adrian's study and watched the carriages arrive at the Old Bailey. Black shapes through the downpour, officials and barristers and journalists jostling for position under the portico. The whole city had been talking about nothing else for days. The papers had printed every detail they could get their hands on: the conspiracy, the attempted abduction, the Duchess who'd fought back with a fireplace poker. Some of the stories were true. Most weren't. Lydia had stopped reading them after the third one claimed she'd fought off 6 armed men single-handedly. "You don't have to go," Adrian said from behind her. She turned. He was sitting at his desk, a stack of legal documents in front of him, his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. They'd both been up until past midnight with the solicitors, going over testimony, preparing for every possible line of attack the defense might take. "Yes, I do," Lydia said. "The prosecutors have Cade's testimony. They have the financial records. They have letters. You've already given your deposition. You don't need to sit in that courtroom and watch them try to tear you apart." "I need to see her," Lydia said. "I need to look her in the eye when they read the verdict." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "She's going to say terrible things about you," he said. "Her barrister is going to paint you as an ungrateful daughter, mentally unstable, easily manipulated. They're going to say I groomed you, that I took advantage of a vulnerable girl. You know that, don't you?" "I know." "And you're still going." "I'm still going." Adrian stood, crossed the room, stopped in front of her. "Then I'm going with you," he said. "And if it gets to be too much, if you need to leave, you tell me. We'll walk out. I don't care if the judge is in the middle of a sentence. You say the word, and we're gone. Agreed?" "Agreed." He took her hand, squeezed it once. "You're stronger than you think you are," he said. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was full, and there were people standing 3 deep at the back, craning their necks to get a look at the woman in the dock. Vivian Hale sat between 2 guards, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed. She was wearing black, mourning clothes, though Lydia couldn't imagine who she was mourning except perhaps herself. Her hair was pinned severely back. She looked older than Lydia remembered, smaller. But when Vivian's eyes found Lydia in the gallery, they were the same as they'd always been, cold, calculating, utterly certain of their own rightness. Lydia met them without flinching. The judge entered, a stern-faced man named Carver, who looked like he'd been carved from the same oak as the bench he sat behind. The charges were read: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, bribery of a crown official. The list went on. Vivian's barrister, a sleek man named Hastings with gray hair and a voice like honey, stood and entered a plea of not guilty on all counts. The trial began. The prosecution went first. They called Cade to the stand, and he told his story in the same flat, mechanical voice he'd used in the Lord Chancellor's office. He named names. He described the meetings, the payments, the plan to have Lydia declared unfit and returned to her mother's custody. He did not look at Vivian once. Hastings cross-examined him for 2 hours, trying to discredit him as a convicted criminal testifying in exchange for leniency. But Cade didn't break. He repeated his story, word for word, and when Hastings finally gave up and sat down, the damage was done. They called the financial examiner next, a dry man with spectacles who walked the jury through page after page of forged documents and fraudulent transactions. Then they called Adrian, who testified about the letters from Cresswell, the attempted sale of the Liverpool property, the timeline that connected Vivian to the conspiracy. And then they called Lydia. She had been dreading this moment since the trial began. She walked to the witness box with her hands clasped in front of her, the way she used to walk through the corridors at Marwick House, and she swore her oath and sat down and looked out at the courtroom full of strangers staring at her like she was something in a zoo. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Talbot, asked her to state her name. Lydia Blackthorne, Lydia said, Duchess of Ravensholt. And prior to your marriage, what was your name? Lydia Hale. And you are the daughter of the defendant, Vivian Hale? Yes. Mrs. Talbot walked her through the story. The years at Marwick House, the control, the abuse, the day Adrian had arrived and offered her a way out. Lydia answered every question in a clear, steady voice, and she did not look at her mother until Mrs. Talbot asked the question Lydia had been waiting for. Your Grace, Mrs. Talbot said. In your own words, did your mother intend to harm you? Lydia looked at Vivian. Her mother's face was a mask, expressionless, perfect. Yes, Lydia said. Can you elaborate? She intended to keep me under her control until my 21st birthday. At that point, I would have come into my inheritance, and she would have had me declared mentally unfit so she could maintain control of the trust. And when that was no longer sustainable, when people started to ask questions, she would have had me killed and made it look like an illness. That was the plan. A murmur went through the courtroom. And how do you know this? Mrs. Talbot asked. Because I lived with her for 18 years, Lydia said. And I know how she thinks. She doesn't see people as people. She sees them as tools. And when a tool stops being useful, you get rid of it. That's what I was to her. A tool. And when I stopped being useful, she was going to get rid of me. Your Grace, that is a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Lydia said. It's a fact. She forged my signature. She tried to sell property that wasn't hers. She hired men to abduct me when I escaped. Those aren't opinions. Those are things that happened, things you can prove. And if you need more proof, look at her. She's sitting there right now, and she doesn't look sorry. She doesn't look ashamed. She looks annoyed that she got caught. Mrs. Talbot smiled. Thank you, Your Grace. No further questions. Hastings stood. He approached the witness box slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression one of gentle concern. Your Grace, he said, you've told us a very compelling story, a story of abuse and neglect, and a mother who, according to you, wanted you dead. But I have to ask, is any of it true? Yes. Can you prove it? I just did. You've told us what you believe happened, but belief is not evidence. You say your mother hit you. Do you have witnesses? No. She was careful about that. You say she forged your signature. Do you have proof? The financial examiner testified. The financial examiner testified that documents were forged, Hastings said smoothly. He did not testify that your mother was the one who forged them. In fact, Your Grace, isn't it possible that someone else forged those documents? Someone with access to your mother's household? Someone who stood to gain from making your mother look guilty? Who? Lydia said. Who would do that? Hastings smiled. I don't know, Your Grace, but I do know that you had a great deal to gain from your mother's downfall. A husband, a title, a fortune, freedom, quite a list of benefits for a girl who claims she was a prisoner. Lydia's hands tightened on the edge of the witness box. I didn't want any of those things, she said. I wanted to survive. And you have, Hastings said, spectacularly. You went from a sickly girl in an attic to a duchess in a matter of weeks. That's quite an achievement. Some might even call it suspicious. Some might call it luck, Lydia said. Or calculation, Hastings said. Your Grace, isn't it true that you met the Duke of Ravensholt only once before agreeing to leave with him? Yes. And isn't it true that you married him less than 2 weeks later? Yes. That's quite fast, wouldn't you say? For two people who barely know each other? We had a reason. Yes, Hastings said. You did. Because if you were married to a duke, your mother couldn't touch you, legally or otherwise. Quite clever, really. Some might even say it was planned. It wasn't, Your Grace, Hastings said, leaning forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried through the entire courtroom. Isn't it possible that you are lying about all of this? That your mother is a kind, devoted woman who made some poor financial decisions, and you, a young woman with a talent for manipulation, saw an opportunity to escape your quiet life and seized it? That you convinced the Duke to marry you? Convinced him to fund this prosecution? Convinced him that you were a victim, when really you were just an ambitious girl who wanted more than what you had? The courtroom was silent. Lydia looked at Hastings, at the jury, at the gallery, where Adrian was sitting with his hands clenched on the rail. Then she looked at her mother. Vivian was smiling, a small, private smile that Lydia had seen 1,000 times. The smile that said, "You can't win. You were never going to win. I taught you everything you know, and you think you can use it against me?" And something in Lydia's chest cracked open. Not fear, not anger, certainty. "Mr. Hastings," Lydia said, "you asked if it's possible I'm lying. The answer is yes. It's possible. It's also possible the sky is green and water flows uphill, but possibility is not probability. And the probability is that I'm telling the truth. Because if I were lying, I would have told a better story. I would have made myself more sympathetic. I would have cried. I would have begged. I would have played the part of the helpless victim, because that's what people want to see. A girl who needs saving. But I don't need saving anymore. I saved myself. And the reason you don't believe me is because you can't imagine a world where a girl like me looks a man like you in the eye and calls him a liar to his face. But that's the world we're in now. So you can question my story all you want. The jury will decide who to believe, and I'll take my chances." Hastings stared at her. "No further questions," he said. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Lydia and Adrian waited in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, along with Mrs. Talbot, and 2 clerks who kept bringing them tea that neither of them drank. Lydia sat by the window and watched the rain. Adrian paced. At one point, Mrs. Talbot tried to reassure them that the length of the deliberation was a good sign. It meant the jury was taking it seriously. But her voice sounded hollow even to her. When the bells rang to signal the jury's return, Lydia's hands went cold. They filed back into the courtroom. Vivian was brought up from the holding cells, still in her black dress, still composed. The foreman of the jury, a middle-aged man with a shopkeeper's hands, stood and faced the judge. "Have you reached a verdict?" Judge Carver asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find the defendant?" "Guilty." Vivian's face didn't change. "On the charge of forgery?" "Guilty." "On the charge of attempted murder?" A pause, longer than the others. "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. Judge Carver slammed his gavel 3 times, shouting for order, but the noise rolled over him like a wave. Vivian stood, her hands gripping the rail of the dock, and for the first time since the trial began, her mask slipped. Her face went white. Her mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. She looked at Lydia. Lydia looked back. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a kind of terrible understanding. Vivian had spent 18 years believing she was smarter than everyone around her, that she could manipulate the world into giving her what she wanted, that people were tools, and tools could be controlled. She had been wrong. The girl she'd tried to erase had just erased her instead. Judge Carver restored order. He sentenced Vivian to 20 years transportation. Australia. Hard labor. She would be 59 when she was released, if she survived that long. Most didn't. Vivian was led from the courtroom in chains. She did not look back. The aftermath took weeks to settle. Whitmore was convicted on separate charges of bribery and corruption and sentenced to 15 years. The remaining investors were tried in smaller, quieter proceedings, and most of them were either fined or imprisoned. Cade was transported as agreed, his death sentence commuted in exchange for his testimony. Lydia's inheritance was restored to her in full. Adrian helped her hire a manager for the shipping business and a solicitor to oversee the property in Liverpool. She sold Marwick House, the whole estate, furniture and all, to a family from Birmingham who didn't know its history and didn't care to learn it. She never went back. One morning in late November, Lydia woke in the London house to find Adrian already awake, sitting by the window with the letter in his hands. "What is it?" she asked. "An invitation," he said. "From the Queen. She wants to meet you." Lydia sat up. "Why?" "Because you've made her government look incompetent. Whitmore was one of hers. She wants to know how a duchess barely out of childhood managed to uncover a conspiracy her own investigators missed." He paused. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." "What do you think I should do?" "I think," Adrian said, "that you should do whatever you want. You've spent enough of your life doing what other people expected." Lydia thought about it. I'll go, she said, but only if you come with me. I'm not invited. You are now. I'm the Duchess of Ravensholt. If I want my husband with me, my husband comes with me. Adrian smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him since the trial ended. Yes, Your Grace, he said. Botswaken. They met the Queen a week later in a private audience at Windsor. She was smaller than Lydia had expected and older, with sharp eyes and a mouth that looked like it didn't smile often, but could when it chose to. She gestured for them to sit and spent the first 10 minutes asking Lydia polite, pointed questions about the trial, about Vivian, about how Lydia had managed to gather the evidence that brought down Whitmore. Lydia answered honestly. She did not embellish. She did not perform. When she finished, the Queen was quiet for a moment. Your Grace, she said, do you know why I wanted to meet you? No, ma'am. Because I have spent my entire life in rooms full of men who believe women are incapable of anything except producing heirs and looking decorative. And then you appeared, a girl of 18 who took apart a criminal network that had been operating under my government's nose for years. With nothing but intelligence and determination, and from what I understand, a fireplace poker. Lydia almost laughed. It was a lucky shot, ma'am. I doubt that, the Queen said. Luck is what people call skill when they don't want to admit someone is better than they are. You, Duchess, are skilled, and I wanted to tell you in person, you have done your country a service, and if you ever find yourself in need of assistance, you may write to me directly. I will see that it reaches the right people. Thank you, ma'am. The Queen stood. The audience was over, but as Lydia and Adrian were leaving, the Queen called after them. Your Grace. Lydia turned. Your mother, the Queen said. I understand she will be transported soon. Yes, ma'am. Do you regret it, seeing her convicted? Lydia thought about the question, about the girl in the attic, about the locked linen room, about 18 years of bruises and silence and fear. No, Lydia said. I don't. The Queen nodded. Good. Regret is a luxury. Save it for the things that matter. They returned to Blackthorn in December, just before the first snow. The house looked different in winter. The black stone even darker against the white of the moors, smoke rising from a dozen chimneys, the windows glowing gold. Mrs. Calloway met them at the door with Hester and Thomas and half the household staff, all of them grinning like they'd won something. Welcome home, Your Grace, Mrs. Calloway said. It's good to be back, Lydia said. That night, she and Adrian sat in the library by the fire. He was reading a letter from his solicitor about some business matter in York. She was staring into the flames, thinking about nothing in particular. Lydia, Adrian said. She looked up. I've been thinking, he said, about what happens next. What do you mean? The trial is over. Your mother is gone. Your inheritance is secure. You're safe. Which means the original agreement, the month I promised you, to decide if you wanted to stay. We're well past it now. And I need to know, do you want to stay? Not because you're afraid, not because you need protection, but because this is where you want to be. Lydia set down her book. Adrian, she said, I told you in London. I'm staying. I know, but I want to make sure you know what that means. You're not my wife because the law says you are. You're my wife because you choose to be. And if that ever changes, if you ever wake up and realize you made this choice for the wrong reasons, I need you to tell me. I won't hold you to something you don't want. Lydia stood, crossed to where he was sitting, knelt in front of him so they were eye level, the way he'd done the morning they'd agreed to marry. Adrian, she said, I spent 18 years with a woman who told me every day that I was worthless, that I was a burden, that I should be grateful for the scraps she gave me. And then you came, and you told me the opposite. You told me I was strong. You told me I was remarkable. You gave me a choice when no one else would. You believed me when no one else did. So when you ask if I want to stay, the answer is yes. Not because I'm afraid of what's out there, but because this house, this life is the first thing I've ever chosen for myself, and I'm not letting it go. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, the same hand he'd shaken the day they agreed to marry, the same hand he'd slid a too large ring onto in a church full of strangers. Then stay, he said. I will. And Lydia, yes? About the kiss. At the wedding. The one I didn't give you. What about it? I'd like to give it to you now, if that's all right. Lydia's breath caught. That's all right, she said. He leaned forward and kissed her, gently, carefully, the way someone handles something precious and breakable. And Lydia, who had flinched from every touch for 18 years, kissed him back and did not flinch at all. When they pulled apart, Adrian was smiling. There, he said. Now it's official. It was official the moment I said yes in that church. No, Adrian said. It was official the moment you decided you wanted to. Spring came early to Blackthorn that year. By March, the moors were covered in heather, and the ravens were building nests in the eaves of the keep. Lydia spent her mornings working with the estate manager, learning how to run the property she'd inherited. She spent her afternoons with Mrs. Calloway, reorganizing the household, hiring new staff, opening rooms that had been closed since the last Duchess died. And she spent her evenings with Adrian, talking about everything and nothing. His plans for the estate, her plans for the shipping business, what they would do when summer came. One morning in April, Lydia woke to find a letter on the breakfast table. It was addressed to her in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it. It was from a woman named Sarah Winters, a widow in Manchester who had read about the trial in the newspapers. She wrote that she too had been abused by a family member, that she too had been told she was imagining things, that she was difficult, that she should be grateful, that she had seen Lydia's testimony and had finally found the courage to leave. I don't know if you will read this, the letter said, but I wanted you to know you saved my life, not by rescuing me, but by showing me I could rescue myself. Lydia sat at the table for a long time, the letter in her hands. Then she went to Adrian's study and found paper and ink, and she wrote back. Over the next 6 months, more letters arrived, dozens of them, from women who had read about the trial and had seen themselves in Lydia's story. Women who had been told they were mad, or difficult, or ungrateful. Women who had been hit and silenced and erased. Lydia answered every one. And slowly, quietly, without quite meaning to, she became something she had never expected to be. A voice for women who had none. Adrian found her one evening in the library, surrounded by letters, her ink-stained fingers flying across the page. You're going to need a secretary, he said. I'm going to need 100 secretaries, Lydia said. Look at this. 20 letters today alone. And they're all asking the same question. How did you do it? How did you get out? What do you tell them? The truth, Lydia said. That I got lucky. That I had help. That I had you. But that even if they don't have those things, they can still fight. They can still survive. They just have to decide they're worth fighting for. Adrian smiled. You know what you are, don't you? He said. What? Dangerous. Good, Lydia said. I've had enough of being harmless. 2 years after the trial, Lydia stood on the steps of the Old Bailey again. But this time, she wasn't a witness. She was a patron. She had used part of her inheritance to fund a legal aid society for women with nowhere else to turn. Women like her, who had been abused and silenced and told they had no recourse. The society provided lawyers, safe houses, and support for women trying to leave dangerous situations. The opening ceremony was small, just a handful of officials, a few journalists, and Adrian standing at the back, watching with that same quiet pride he'd had the day she'd testified. Lydia gave a short speech. She thanked the lawyers who had volunteered their time. She thanked Adrian for his support, and she thanked the women who had written to her, who had trusted her with their stories, who had reminded her that survival was not the end, it was the beginning. When she finished, a reporter from the Times raised his hand. Your Grace, he said, what do you say to people who claim you're overstepping? That this is not a duchess's place? Lydia looked at him. I say, she said, that a duchess's place is wherever she decides it is, and I've decided it's here. The reporter scribbled furiously. That night, back at the London house, Lydia found Adrian in the drawing room with a newspaper in his hands. You made the front page again, he said. What does it say? That the Duchess of Ravensholt is a dangerous radical who is corrupting the natural order of society. That's not bad, Lydia said. Better than sickly girl in an attic. Adrian laughed. A real laugh, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. You know, he said, I came to Marwick House expecting to rescue a victim. Instead, I got a revolutionary. Is that a complaint? It's an observation. Are you sorry? Adrian set down the paper, crossed the room, took her hands in his. Lydia, he said, I have watched you go from a girl who couldn't look me in the eye to a woman who stares down judges and queens and journalists without flinching. I have watched you turn pain into power. I have watched you become the thing your mother was most afraid of, someone who couldn't be controlled. So no, I am not sorry. I am proud, and I am grateful. And I am very, very glad I walked into that house 2 years ago and met you. Lydia's eyes stung. I'm glad too, she said. That night, they went back to Blackthorn. The house was dark when they arrived, but Mrs. Calloway had left the lamps burning in the hall, and there was a fire in the library. And upstairs, in the room that had once belonged to the last Duchess, Lydia's things were waiting. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the bed, the wardrobe, the window that looked out over the moors. Are you all right? Adrian asked. Yes, Lydia said. I'm remembering the first time I saw this room, how strange it felt, how much it scared me. And now? Now it feels like home. She turned to him. Adrian, she said, do you remember what you told me the day we met? You said the month was mine, that I could leave at the end of it if I wanted, that you wouldn't hold me to something I didn't choose. I remember. I've been thinking about that, Lydia said, about the idea of choice. And I realized something. For 18 years, I didn't get to choose anything, not what I ate or wore or said or did. Everything was decided for me. And then you gave me a choice, and I chose to stay. And every day since then, I've been making that choice again. To stay, to fight, to build something. And I don't think I ever thanked you for that, for showing me what it feels like to choose. Lydia, so thank you, she said, for the choice, for the fight, for believing I was worth saving even when I didn't believe it myself. Thank you for being the first person in my life who told me the truth and then let me decide what to do with it. Adrian pulled her close. You're welcome, he said. And outside, the ravens called to each other across the moors, and the wind rattled the shutters. And the house that had been silent for 3 years was finally awake. 5 years later, Lydia Blackthorn stood in the House of Lords and gave testimony before a parliamentary committee on legal reform. She was 33 years old. She had helped draft legislation that would give married women the right to own property. She had funded 3 more legal aid societies across England. She had written a book about her experience that had sold 10,000 copies and sparked a national conversation about abuse and power and who got to decide what truth looked like. And she had done it all without asking permission. The committee chairman, a gray-haired man named Pembroke, who looked like he'd been born disapproving, asked her why she thought the law should change. Lydia looked at him. Because, she said, the law as it stands assumes that women cannot be trusted to make decisions about their own lives, that we need fathers or husbands or brothers to protect us from ourselves. And I am living proof that assumption is wrong. I made decisions, hard ones, dangerous ones, and I survived them. So did the hundreds of women I've helped over the past 5 years. We don't need protection, we need autonomy, and we need the law to reflect that. Pembroke frowned. Your Grace, with all due respect, your experience is exceptional. Most women are not duchesses. Most women do not have the resources. Most women, Lydia interrupted, did not grow up in a house where their mother tried to kill them. Most women did not have to fight their way out with a fireplace poker. Most women have not had to rebuild their entire lives from nothing. But that doesn't mean they're not capable of it. It just means they haven't been given the chance. That's what I'm asking you to change. Give them the chance. The room was silent. Then one of the other committee members, a younger man named Hartley, leaned forward. Your Grace, he said, what would you say to people who argue that changing these laws would destroy the family? That giving women independence would lead to chaos? Lydia smiled. I would say, she said, that they're right. It will lead to chaos. The chaos of women making their own decisions. The chaos of women leaving situations that are killing them. The chaos of women building lives on their own terms instead of someone else's. And if that's the kind of chaos you're afraid of, then you've already lost. Hartley grinned. Pembroke did not. But 6 months later, the bill passed, And Lydia Blackthorne, the girl who'd spent 18 years silent, became the woman whose voice changed the law. She returned to Blackthorne in the summer when the heather was in bloom and the air smelled like honey and rain. Adrian met her at the door. He was 48 now, with silver threading through his hair, but his eyes were the same, dark and steady and full of that quiet strength that had saved her life once and had been saving it, in small ways, every day since. "How was London?" he asked. "Loud," Lydia said. "How was here?" "Quiet." "Good," Lydia said. "I could use some quiet." They walked through the house together, past the library where they'd spent so many evenings, past the drawing room where Kate had pounded on the door, past the staircase that led to the room where Lydia had first learned what it felt like to sleep behind a locked door. At the top of the stairs, Adrian stopped. "Lydia," he said, "do you ever regret it? Any of it?" "Which part?" "All of it. Coming here, marrying me, the trial, the work. Do you ever wish you'd chosen something easier?" Lydia thought about it. She thought about the girl in the attic, counting bells and imagining a slate roof. She thought about the woman who'd stood in a courtroom and called her mother a liar. She thought about the letters from women who'd written to say thank you, or help me, or I did it, I left, I'm free. "No," she said, "not once." "Good," Adrian said, "because I don't think I could have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have." "No," he said, "I really couldn't. You made me remember what it feels like to have something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. You gave me a reason to be more than just angry, so thank you." Lydia took his hand. "We're even then," she said. They stood at the top of the stairs, looking out the window at the moors rolling away under the summer sky, and Lydia thought, this is it. This is what winning looks like. Not a fairy tale, not a perfect ending where everything was solved and nothing hurt. Just two people who'd survived the worst and had decided together to build something better. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when people asked Lydia Blackthorne how she'd done it, how she'd escaped, how she'd survived, how she'd become the woman who changed the law, she always gave the same answer. "I stopped waiting for someone to save me," she said, "and I saved myself." And when they asked what advice she had for other women in impossible situations, she said this: "You're not mad. You're not difficult. You're not imagining it, and you are not alone. Find one person who believes you, one door that locks, one choice that's yours, and start there. Start small, but start. Because survival is not the end of the story, it's the beginning, and you deserve to see what comes next." She lived to be 73. She outlived her mother by 30 years, and when she died, peacefully, in her sleep, at Blackthorne Hall, with Adrian's hand in hers, the newspapers called her a hero. But the women who'd written to her, who'd read her book, who'd used the legal aid societies she'd funded to escape their own nightmares, called her something else. They called her proof. Proof that it was possible. Proof that a girl could walk out of a house where she was dying and into a life where she was dangerous. Proof that the ones who survive are not the ones who wait to be rescued. They're the ones who decide they're worth rescuing. And then they do it themselves.